Hey everyone, Nicole here to go over projection bumps in Lineup HQ. We have a feature for all sports that allows us to bump up to 5 levels, or down 5 levels, a player's projection. Whether it's the fantasy points, the floor, or the ceiling, whatever you're building off of, this bump will take that into account and give a 4% boost at each level. So, on a regular build, I'm building using fantasy points. I'm going to see the fantasy points here under this fantasy points column, and they're going to match exactly to the player pool. But if I want to bump somebody up or down without actually touching those min and max exposures or messing with the RotoGrinders projections, I can do that with the bump. So let's boost Bryce Harper 2 levels in the ceiling category. So his ceiling is normally 40. I'm going to build using ceiling and give him a boost. And now in my Bryce Harper lineups, you'll see he's at 43.2. That's because he got a 4% boost each time he got bumped. So now he's up to a 1.6 increase and another 1.6, counts for 3.2. So you'll see those boosts in the lineups that you generate, but they can change from build to build, right? Xander Bogaerts was at 100%. If I want to bump him down, I go back in here. Maybe I drop him 3 levels. Let's see what that does to his exposure. Now he's down at 60% for this particular build, and his number went down to 39.76. So he showed up in a smaller amount because of that drop, and my randomness and whatever other build settings I have going on helped contribute to him falling there. But what's happening is the optimizer is giving us a different projection for that player without actually having to go and change his fantasy points projections for the slate. Until next time, this has been Nicole Valencia for the Lineup HQ 2-Minute Drill.
is going on, RotoGrinders? Dean here. That's Dean 7904. If you want to get all technical, that is the number. That is not the number. That is the name. That is the handle in the daily fantasy industry. It is 10:30 on the East Coast, 7:30 in the morning in the West Coast. Good morning, West Coast. 9:30 Tennessee time. So, of course, I'm just time of the flagship show here at RotoGrinders. It's called Grinderslive. We're talking NFL DFS Week 2. This is the very start of a 1.5 hour block. Take you guys where I have the kickoff to stay here and kick back, relax, talk some NFL DFS. And hey, what's up, chat? Do like, do subscribe, turn on notifications. I'm fired up, man. I'm ready to get week 1 behind me. Bust out that Men in Black, like mind eraser kind of thing, because it's not go well for your boy.
Neuralizer.
What was it called?
Neuralizer.
Neuralizer.
Yeah, dumb.
I'm sorry. I don't happen to have a spare neuralizer just laying around. Grant, you have one of those? You buy one on eBay these days?
Oh, I got like 6 or 7 of them.
All right. You got a neuralizer guy? You got a guy?
Yeah.
What's up, Grant? How are things? What is it? I guess it's I didn't do, you always get upset. We did not do not Mountain Time. So shout out to Mountain Time. It's 8:30 where you're at. We excited about week 2?
Oh, I'm excited. It's gonna be a good one. I got money, I got bets, I got things going on.
You're so excited you wear your good tank top, but we do appreciate that. The chat appreciates that as well. You did mention you have some bets going on, so let's go ahead and tell the people, make sure they know about the BetMGM promo we have going on. Let's see, we have, if you use the promo code GRINDERSBET, GRINDERS bet, you bet $10 to get it $200 instantly. How about that? That's a pretty sweet deal. And Grant, you're going to help the people out. You ran off a couple bets. You have real American dollars wagered over there today. And you ran up some bets pre-show for me that you happen to like at BetMGM. Give the people, don't give them all because you're like 8. Give like 2 or 3.
Justin Herbert over 1.5 touchdowns at -190. Kyler Murray over 1.5 touchdowns at -170. Jefferson over 5.5 receptions at +110. And Thielen over 4.5 receptions at -130.
Andre, you like those? Anything you want to add? Or I'm not sure if I don't know if you can dabble over there or not, but do you have anything in the betting space you happen to like today?
Yeah, I do. I do actually place a couple bets when I was in Jersey, since I kind of missed my flight to Vegas this week. The couple I have that I really like a lot today. It's a couple of parlays actually, but I'll give you some of the picks that I have from it. I like Jacoby Myers to score a touchdown. That was +210 when I placed it. So I think that's going to come through today though. Robert Woods also to score a touchdown at any point today. And then also I like for what's his name to get over, and I like for Cole Beasley to get over 51.5 yards this week. That's a little small parlay you can place if you want to. I think that'll cash out for you guys and hopefully get some money in return.
That's Andre. I did not properly introduce you. My apologies if you guys are not aware there in chat. Andre, he's won $1 million playing DFS, but he's won many 6-figure contests as well. He's very good at the DFS. Do you have any thoughts you want to give as far as week 1? We only have so much time. Feel free to give any week 1 thoughts and the overall thoughts as far as this slate today, which is absolutely wild. And the incredible thing about one of the amazing things I think about it is just the way it's kind of set up. The back half of the doubleheader is like the 4 most premium games, and the front half is, I don't know. Red zone might be kind of a bit of a bore. It's going to be really interesting how people are working those player minutes remaining. General thoughts as far as today's slate before we're going to dig in. We're going to talk about our favorite quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, stacks, all that good stuff, and whatever the chat wants to talk about as well. Again, what up, chat? Like, subscribe, turn on notifications, fire off some questions. Devin, our fabulous producer extraordinaire, is compiling those questions. He's going to throw them my way. I will ask these gentlemen later on in the show. Give us specifics. Let us know if you're talking about Yahoo, if you're talking about Fanduel, if you're talking about Draftkings, cash, tournament, mass multi-enter contest. All the details help in answering the question. All right, Andre, I got the plugs out of the way for the most part. We got one more on layaway we'll talk about soon enough. But thoughts as far as today's slate, which I think is a good one.
It is a very good slate in my opinion. I really like it a lot. I've been diving in like real deep on it to try to make sure I have a profitable week this week, because last week was probably the worst week I've ever had in football that I can ever imagine. But I say don't get comfortable if you're in first place after 1 o'clock, after the 1 o'clock games are done. Because those 4 o'clock games are coming. They're coming strong, and there's specifically one play I love. Well, obviously there's a lot of plays everyone loves, but one play I definitely will be above the field on for sure. two players, actually, two quarterbacks I think are going to be above the field on definitely that I think should be more owned than what they are. And possibly a third as well, too.
Yeah, we just kind of referenced them there. The back half, all the premium games, Tennessee at Seattle, 54 total, Seattle with a 30 team total. That's later on today, 425. Dallas at the Chargers, that game should be electric, 55 total. Dallas 3-point dog there. It's high and it's tight. Tampa big favorite, but 32 team total, 51.5 total points against Atlanta. And then you got Arizona versus Minnesota, another 50.5 total, I believe. Grant, those are the 4 highest totals on the board, right? I think there's a couple 48s and 49s, but none crack 50. How are you handling that situation as far as just like because we always talk about late swap and like people don't late swap, especially, based upon the 1 o'clock news, but what's happened to your players at 1 o'clock as far as your lineups. And, today that's always applicable, but today it feels like more applicable than ever, just the way the slate is, stacking up. Your thoughts, Grant?
Yeah, I was going to mention that today is probably more important to be paying attention to late swap more than any other week that I've seen. I mean, we're going to have a huge amount of chalk in the later games. There's no secret that the 4 later games are probably the 4 best game stacks on the entire slate. It's going to be a lot of fun, but if you don't hit on the early stuff, then you kind of know that you're going to be, if you're playing chalky players, like if you're playing a Dallas stack or a Charger stack or a Tampa Bay stack or Arizona stack or even a Seattle stack, or playing Chris Carson, you're going to have to switch things around in order to play catch up, in order to just min cash a lot of times. So some of the guys in the earlier slate, like let's say you don't play Najee Harris, he ends up going for 30 points. You're immediately playing non-chalky lineups in the later game. In the early games, if you get guys that hit like big at low ownership, let's say that you end up playing, I don't know, Eli Morgan at 6%, and he ends up going for 30.
With the Cleveland Indians, Eli Morgan, the pitcher?
Whatever, whatever
Mitchell.
his name is, Mitchell. Gosh, darn 2 seasons at once. But
I got it.
Yeah. If you end up playing guys like that are pivots off the chalk, and you get them in incredibly low ownership, you can end up swapping over to chalkier guys that are probably going to be heavily owned, should succeed, and know that you have a pretty good shot at winning it if you have 1 to 2 low owned guys. So I personally am probably going to have a lot of lineups playing a lot of chalk at the beginning of the day and kind of go from there. I mean, a lot of the guys that I'm playing in the earlier games are going to be less chalky than they should be, and also have a chance to fail. Obviously, fading any of the highly chalky players can go bad. But if I got a guy like, I don't know, Taylor go for a big game, Cooper Kupp actually might be fairly high owned.
He's going to be popular, Kupp.
Yeah. I don't know, Damian Harris on certain sites won't be terribly high owned. Montgomery, Mixon, like Chubb, all these guys that are going to be lower owned than some of the chalky guys and give you a little bit different build. If they go off in the early games, you have a chance to get huge amount of like a lead with some chalky guys going into the later games and have a good shot at taking down a GPP.
By the way, if you were to trust Ian Rappaport, who's always it's touch and go sometimes with his reports, but according to his tweet, the 49ers should feature Eli Mitchell today at running back. Of course, Mostert. A lot of us reacted to that news with last week as far as the scratch on San Francisco side, and I wasn't really aware of Eli Mitchell. I'll be honest, and I loaded up on Mostert, and that's part of the reason why it was not good for your boy. But in theory, if you're trust at Rappaport, we're looking at potentially Mitchell being the lead back there for San Fran, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise anyway. All right, Andre, let's talk quarterback.
One more thing that I want to mention to people, especially with things kind of going how they are, and with the chalk being what it is, specifically the fact that Carson, Eckler, Zeke are all going to be fairly highly owned, and they all play in the later games. One thing you should keep in mind in order to maximize your ROI, if you've got a shot at first place and you have 2 lineups that are roughly the same amount of points, if you have Chris Carson in both those lineups, switch one to Zeke. It's that simple, because let's say Carson's the only guy that you have going in both those lineups. Both of them have the exact same amount of points. The best you can do is tie for something. But if you switch over to Elliott, then you immediately have two lineups that are viable for first place. That makes sense? Gosh,
I got it.
Yeah,
No
and
worries.
Devin's putting how many hours I've been awake for. It's a lot.
Well, let's see. There's a poll in the chat. How many hours has Grant been awake for? More than 12 or less than 12? Well, wait a second. Oh, like meaning like you woke up 12 hours ago. I got it. Do you want to give the official answer? Or you want to wait for the poll to actually be answered?
I mean, people? It's 12 hours was ridiculous, guys. I've been up since 3:30 in the morning. So that was about 5 hours ago.
What
12
time
hours would be ridiculous. Strange enough, like 9 o'clock.
Oh man, you're such an old person. 9 o'clock.
I don't normally, but I didn't get much sleep on Saturday, and I'm like, oh, I can either nap or I can just go to bed really early because I have to be up at 3:30 a.m.
Andre, normally I don't really care too much about quarterback ownership. There's 26 options. It generally gets dispersed pretty well, but what we're seeing as far as our ownership projections, and Devin's going to go ahead and show it off to the people as far as the lineup HQ. And hey, you guys can use this at your own leisure as well. You guys want to use this and look at all our projections and content to all our shows and all the premium shows and all the premium content, the premium articles, all that good stuff. The lineup builder, you can get yourself $10 off the first month. Just NFL, if you want just NFL, or you want the combo package, all the sports with the exception of NASCAR, $10 off that way as well. Andre, you alluded to a couple of quarterbacks you liked. I'm going to guess maybe kind of sort of. One of them might be Dak Prescott. One of them might be Justin Herbert. Both those guys, in the 4 o'clock, set, and they're both expecting 13-14% as far as the ownership. Besides that, I don't think ownership matters a ton. Your thoughts as far as those two at the top? Do you have a favorite amongst those in the same game? And then where else do you want to go as far as quarterbacks?
Those actually were quarterbacks I weren't talking about, but they are in my pool. I am at the field with those quarterbacks. I do love them today. But I know it's a popular game that everyone's going to be on. So I'm going to try to be a little bit different with my spot at quarterback. But out of those two specifically, I love both of them. It's kind of hard. I want to say Justin Herbert, but I kind of like Dak a little bit more just because he has a rushing upside a little bit. Because he can move around with his legs a little bit more than Justin, I believe. But I know also he's coming off that ankle injury that he had a year ago. So I mean, we'll see what happens. But they both are pretty much equal in my opinion. But the quarterback that I really do love a lot today, one of them is Tom Brady. I know everyone says noodle arm Tom Brady against this Atlanta defense who still shows that they are bad, that they're horrible, who let Jalen Hurts have pretty much a field day almost against them last week. I don't see why he can't do the same thing this week. And he has a lot of talent on obviously on the offensive end where he has multiple targets to receivers where he can hit Gronk, OJ Howard, then you got Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, and Mike Evans as your options. And then also that's not including the running backs that they have with Leonard Fournette, Bernard, and whatever with Peyton Barber. What is not Peyton Barber?
Jones, Fournette, and Gio Bernard.
And Jones, yes. So he has a lot of those options. So to me, he's someone I love today. I want to get over the field of him and against Atlanta. And another person I like today a lot that same plays as last week pretty much is Russell Wilson. He's someone I'm looking to be above the field on as well in a matchup that against Tennessee. I want to see how bad their defense really is this week to see if it really was just a fluke or not. But either way, I think they have talented receivers on the outside with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf that can take advantage of it, and a tight end Everett that can sneak on people, get some touchdowns in the red zone. So I like those two. I like those two as my top options as far as today. One person I've really been interested in looking at that I feel two of the people that was actually looking at that I know their ownership is too low on, in my opinion. Actually, one is too low on. The other one is more of a wild tournament play. First person is Matt Stafford. He should be higher on, in my opinion. I think this matchup, just with him pairing with those receivers and Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, it's just a beautiful thing for him. I think he's going to succeed in this game. And we saw what Russell Wilson did to him last week. So what do you think Matthew Stafford's going to do to them? And I think, to me, Matthew Stafford's a little bit more of a more talented passer than Russell Wilson, as far as Russell being more athletic. So I like that matchup a lot. And then another one that's surprising me that I've been trying to jam in more in because they have a high total, and I know everyone's going to go to the running backs on that team, is Baker Mayfield. That's someone I'm kind of interested in trying to be a little bit above the field at. And like I said, they have a 30-point team total. I feel like the Cleveland Browns should be able to put up points easy against this Houston secondary and team. And I think Jarvis Landry can have a big game today.
All right. A lot of fun. There's a couple of holes we can poke. Like the Mayfield thing is like they might run the ball 50 times and Mayfield might throw it like 17 times. Like if the game script goes the way it goes, and in theory, you think Chubb can just like bust off like 7 and 8 yards at a time, like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
the Brady thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, and I love both the running backs today in Cleveland as well. So, but it's just I feel like it could go either way. Just prepare for every type of game script.
And the Brady one for me is like you mentioned that there's too many options, and I don't know who to pair with them because it could be Evans, it could be Brown, it could be Godwin, it could be one of 3 tight ends. It could be Scotty Miller. I suppose that's possible. And like he doesn't get there with his legs. He can go 404. So I mean, I think I kind of have in tournaments, I have a little bit of Ronald Jones and a little bit of Fournette. Like one of those guys is going to get there. I think I don't feel great about either one. You got to hold your nose when you click that button. And that's why I like Russ Moore, and he's got legs, and it's very, very clear who his receivers are, like DK and Lockett. I don't know which one it's going to be, but it's almost definitely going to be one of those two. You got better run backs that game too. So I like Russ the most out of that group of those guys you're throwing out there. Grant, jump in here as far as your thoughts on all these guys, and also kind of work your way back as far as cash game. I think it's going to be Herbert. That's kind of the way it's lining up as far as my cash games right now. Just his price is really, really, solid. The great matchup here against Dallas, 29 team total. Grant, all these quarterbacks you threw out there, your thoughts on whoever you want to, talk about.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of right there with Andre. Herbert probably is the cash game quarterback. I'm not going to argue with Prescott or Herbert stacks. I like that game. Obviously, it's a great game. Everyone's going to be doing it. I'm not fading it. I probably will be slightly over the field on it. It's just kind of the way it is. Dallas has been running at a huge pace every single game with Dak since the beginning of last season. Don't really expect them to change here. So it's going to be a high scoring game with a whole lot of points. So I'm playing it. But if you want to go a little bit off the board, I like what Dre said. Brady, again, huge total over there. You can easily swap over to him. Multiple different pass catchers that can end up getting there. None of them are too overwhelmingly expensive. Godwin, Evans, Brown, and even Gronk are all very viable targets. And you can even go with a little bit of the running game if you want to. I mean, with the 32 implied team total, a lot of guys going to end up getting there. Hurts, I think, is a guy that's probably a little bit under-owned. San Francisco's secondary, a little bit beat up right now. Not quite a bad matchup as it used to be in the past. Hurts put up huge fantasy points in pretty much every single start he's had in his NFL career. I really like Stafford. I'm right there with Dre. I think that he is very good. Obviously, what Russell Wilson did last week was pretty impressive. And if the game would have been a little bit closer, Wilson probably would have put up a whole lot more points. But Stafford, underpriced, great wide receivers, great quarterback, great offense. Everything kind of points towards him being a very, very solid play at low ownership, just 3.7% implied ownership or ownership projection over on ours. So those are kind of the guys. Everyone else is probably about projected as they should be owned. If you really want to go off the board, I don't hate Matt Ryan. They looked terrible the first week, even though they projected really well. And I know it's a tough matchup, but they're going to probably be passing later on in the game. He could end up throwing the ball 50 times. He's done that before. Last season, we saw him put up games of 25 plus points multiple times, throwing the ball 40 plus times. And the game script kind of sets up that way. And if we're just assuming they're bad, that's fine. But they shouldn't be much worse than they were last year. They got rid of Julio, but they didn't play with a few games with Julio last year. And they added Pitts. It's pretty much the same offense that put up big numbers. In Tampa Bay, they're probably not going to run a whole lot against. So I kind of like Matt Ryan as a long shot, low-owned GPP play.
Your favorite pairing with Brady? You guys both like Brady. Andre, you first. Your favorite got to pair with Tom Brady?
I like Chris Godwin. I like running honestly like double stack with them. So I like Chris Godwin, a little bit of Gronk, or running it with Leonard Fournette. That's my second option with those two.
Would you run 2 with Brady?
Yeah.
How about yourself, Grant?
Probably Godwin, although I have multiple stacks of him with Godwin Brown, Godwin Evans, Evans Brown, Gronk Godwin, all those. Like I'm running all those combinations depending on the site.
Same here.
And just to play, spend a little bit more quarterback and it to be a little bit different, like Kyler Murray might be the best quarterback on the board just as far as like fantasy ability. And like we're looking at 6% ownership, give or take, and he's go ahead, Andre.
I was gonna say I'm double the field on that too. He's someone I think is gonna go under-owned, but his prices, he's just a little bit more expensive than everyone else, but he's worth the shot and worth the play for sure.
Yeah, I love being over on Murray, over on Allen as well. Allen's kind of like he had a rough week one. Still, the way that offense is set up, they're going to throw the ball 50 times, like many times, and opportunity matters. Grant, your thought as far as those two quarterbacks or anybody else that's worth talking about? Oh, I do want to mention this is kind of a good time to bring up the Yahoo contest going on today. Yahoo, well, Grant, you're going to give up the players some people they like out there as far as some players you like as far as Yahoo today. I ran my 150 in their big contest. We'll talk about it in a second. It's currently overlaying, but if you guys have not been playing over at Yahoo, you want to play now. We have a promo code for y'all, Grinders25, GRINDERS 25. You get a free $25 bonus on your first deposit. They have single game slates now, Monday, Thursday, and Sunday, with like real money. Grant, like what was it, like $100,000 prize pool last week? I know you were maxing it out last week.
They have 100,000 this week plus a live final entry.
Yeah, and there's a massive overlay, and it's not just overlay brewing in their main contest, the $1 million no fee baller. There's no management fee, no rake, whatever you want to call it. It's $1 million prize pool, $100,000 the first, so 10% up top, and you get a live final seat as well. And out of 66,700 spots available, only 26,000 have been claimed. And you're locked out at their 150. So I got my 150. I can't get any more. It's not in my personal interest to tell people to play this contest, but you really should be playing this contest. Grant, you have some people, some players, some of your favorite players that kind of sort of stand out as far as Yahoo today.
Let me just pull up my ownership and see where they're at. Of course, my computer froze.
Hertz is $26. That's kind of what I was getting at, but go ahead.
Yeah. Dalvin Cook, probably a little bit too cheap, solid overall spot. Najee Harris is a solid play, not as good as he is over on DraftKings, but very good. If you want to go a little bit off the board, Mike Davis is $16, could be heavily involved in the receiving game. Darrell Henderson is too cheap at $18. Cooper Kupp, $22, very good overall play. The entire Chargers game, like just play everyone. All of them are good plays. Like it's that simple. Cook specifically at $13, I think is a pretty solid overall play at tight end. Outside of that, I mean, I'm looking at my highest owned players, and it's the guys that are kind of on other sides outside of Dalvin Cook, who I have a lot of exposure to. Najee Harris, Chris Carson, then Henderson and Mike Davis are both very underpriced.
Henderson, $18, pretty appealing price for sure. Do you want to say hello once again to chat? What up, chat? Like, subscribe, turn on notifications. We're here till 1 o'clock. Well, not us. We'll be replaced soon enough. Two different groups working their way in. We're on later tonight talking showdowns as well. Fire off some questions in chat. We'll do our best to answer them at the end of the show. Devin is compiling them as we speak. We got to move on and talk some running backs. Andre, is there any other quarterbacks you feel is worth mentioning, worth a head nod, or shall we go on and talk about running backs?
I'll just briefly mention Joe Burrow and Ben Roethlisberger. Those are good other plays, I think.
All right.
Okay,
I wasn't sure if that was my end.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Yeah, I said Joe Burrow and Ben Roethlisberger. Those are my two other quarterback plays.
Grant's internet was the chalk to conk out on us first, and there you go.
I have great internet, sir.
So the build is totally different as far as your main build, your main cash game build, and you work differently in tournaments, obviously. But last week, on DraftKings, you were able to play all three: CMC, Kamara, and Cook. And the cash game builds this week, Grant. I'm not sure how much cash you're playing. I'm playing a good bit. Like mine currently have none of them, which is so weird. It's all about that mid-tier. We're hammering those mid-tier receivers, hammering those receivers in the late slate. Najee Harris, Grant, I'm not sure if you've heard this. He was disappointing this week. We all can concede that. But, opportunity, keep this between us, Grant. But, of every snap Pittsburgh had on the offense, do you know how many snaps he played on?
100%.
There you go. Yeah.
I haven't heard that yet.
No. Yeah, I was digging into the box score, and I came with that nugget. I was going to tweet it out before the show started, but I figured I'd keep it just for the viewers. Don't tell your friends or anything. That's the edge on this today's slate. And Chris Carson, Penny's not going to be there for what it's worth, and relatively decent home favorite. The price is really appealing. Those are the two guys that are popping, and they're going to be super, super popular. I'm looking at the ownership right now, and they're 1-2 currently projected. Behind them is Kamara, then Chubb. Chubb feels like it sets up perfectly nice. Of course, there's Hunt that's lurking there as well, but massive home favorite, 30-point team total. Talk to me about Harris and Carson. I assume you're not concerned with Harris, but tell me if you are.
If I'm concerned with Harris?
Yeah, he was bad week one. Do you care? Their line's not good. Okay.
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, it was a tough matchup going up against Buffalo. It was a 1-game sample size. He still ended up having 17 touches. He's going up against Vegas. Not great. Like you said, he's in the game the entire time. It's opportunity. We have opportunity and price coinciding or not really coinciding, because his opportunity should be up there with Cook, with Chubb, with Kamara, with McCaffrey, but he's priced in the mid-tier.
Andre, your thoughts as far as Harris and Carson chalk? Are you in or you out?
I'm definitely in on both of them for sure. I'm gonna probably be at the field though with Harris, just because I don't want to be over the field and I'm trying to get a little bit different. But I'll definitely be probably over the field with Carson. I love the matchup with Carson a little bit better, and I know he's what he can do in this type of matchup, even though they both can succeed. I also think, though, that Seattle has a better offensive line than Pittsburgh currently, even though that's why I like Big Ben a little bit today, because I think that they can still end up passing the ball a little bit more. But both of them are perfectly fine in cash and in tournaments for sure. I would probably just try to pair one of them, though, in tournaments, and I have both of them in the same lineup if you can, unless your receivers are completely different. Then you're fine to do whatever you need.
Among the big spends, Cook, McCaffrey, Kamara, I guess you can throw Henry in the conversation. He's like barely going to be owned at all. Who is your favorite? Cook, McCaffrey, Kamara, and Henry, and why? I guess Chubb too. We can throw Chubb in there too.
I'm gonna say, if you're gonna include Chubb in it, then Chubb is my favorite. I'm over the field on Chubb, but besides Chubb, I'm gonna say like Christian McCaffrey, just because we know what he can do. He's versatile. He's going to get there regardless without scoring a touchdown. It's just a matter of fact of is any of these other running backs going to come close to getting there with whatever his point total is, which I think they can and they will. Like I said, Chubb is 7,800. He's definitely a lot cheaper. So to me, getting him in your lineups instead of McCaffrey, to me, is a better option. And even a guy like Austin Eckler, who's right there below him too, who's in a good matchup, who ownership obviously went down a little bit, which I'm surprised. I'd like both of them a lot, and I think they both can have a standout game.
Yeah, no targets for Eckler in week 1. I assume that's just kind of a goofy stat, and that's going to change going forward. He also got some goal line looks, which is nice as well. Grant, your favorite amongst the big boys as far as Cook, as far as McCaffrey, Kamara, if you want to bring Henry and Chubb into the conversation?
It's Cook, actually. Really simply, Cook's going to be sub 10% owned in all likelihood. We know that generally one of Cook, Jefferson, or Thielen hit for a big game. We've seen multiple 30-point games out of him over the last year. It's going up against Arizona. It's not an overall terrible run defense, if I remember correctly, but it doesn't really matter too much when you're getting a stud running back. He could potentially get 30 touches in this game. He's going overlooked, and people forget that he kind of has McCaffrey-esque upside.
All right. Who else is worth talking? You like Henderson as far as the mid-tier, Grant? Or give me somebody that's like 5 or 6 or 7%, off the board. We got the news as far as San Francisco. It's kind of sort of somewhat interesting. We'll see how that plays out today. I do think the Tampa Bay backfield is kind of sort of somewhat interesting. I know that both plays are gross, but I really feel like one of Jones or Fournette gets there. Any thoughts of running backs a little bit off the board?
Edmonds is a little bit off the board. Like, I don't fully understand why. I know that he's sharing carries with Connor, but it's going to be a high scoring game. It always is. They are favored, so there's a decent chance they're running later in the game, which they might end up using Connor more than Edmonds. But regardless, Edmonds has a chance to break off big plays almost anytime he touches the ball. Edmonds at 4.9K at sub 10% ownership is pretty darn solid there. Outside of that, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, even in tough matchup, like he can end up getting there. He's sub 5% owned, and he can end up with a 3 touchdown game. Outside of that, yeah, it's probably Fournette or Jones. Like, the game script severely favors one of them to go off massively, and neither one of which are very highly owned or very expensive. People just don't want to mess with that roulette wheel.
It's going to be Gio Bernard, right? That's who's going to do it.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, if you're playing Gio, then you probably want to stack up Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. Mike Davis is a guy like you talked about it. Like, I think teams we saw last week in week 1, like, why even try to run the ball? But Davis might catch like 10 passes, which wouldn't surprise me out of the backfield. That's good enough. And, it's 10 points right there in DK. Of course, know your scoring system, half a point on Yahoo, half a point on Fanduel. There's no Jacobs. Does anybody care about, considering Drake or Barber? Barber was thrown out there I don't know if I need this. And if I'm mass multi-entering, maybe a pinch. Andre, do we care about the I was going to say Oakland, Las Vegas backfield?
No. Me personally, no. I have no interest in it whatsoever. It's just too much of a mess. John Gruden doesn't seem to know what I feel like he knows what he's doing clearly because he's a coach. He's been doing it for a long time. But I just feel like with this situation, like it just make it like if you want to keep Peyton Barber in the same role, that's fine. But I think that he should be. I mean, Drake in the same role, then I think that's fine. But I think he should be the lead back personally. But I can't touch that situation. It's just too up in the air. And plus, he still go off and have 100-yard games each. That's how bad I think the Houston's front seven is on front. So it's just that I feel like Jackson didn't take advantage of it. So I'm definitely going to have some Hunt in my lineup. I'm going to be actually dubbed probably over the field for sure on him. As far as with the running back in Tampa Bay situation, I'm all in on Leonard Fournette. I think he's the guy to go with. He's the one who's been getting a lot of touches. And he's getting even some of the passing work, which I was surprised at. So I'm gonna put some eggs in that basket to see how that turns out too. I think, and then you mentioned the 49ers situation. I personally am staying away from it. It's just kind of hard to want to trust it because I know he likes to. The coach there likes to go with the hot hand, and who knows if Mitchell's going to have the hot hand throughout the whole game. That's something that kind of scares me off more than anything because he's quick to pull it and go with another back and experiment like he has all the games where he needs to win games. So for that reason alone, I'm not playing him at all, and I'll take my chances and see how that is in tournaments. I think it's going to be about 10% owned, a little bit more, but we'll see how that turns out. Another back that I know that no one's not talking about that I like a lot is the duo of Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. No one's playing them at all, really. And Jacksonville, we saw with Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram pretty much hasn't really played football in like 2 years because he's just sitting on the sideline, not really doing anything. He had a big day against them last week. So I think both these running backs can. I think one of them will. So I think getting exposure to both of them in your lineups is in DPP lineups is good for sure. And Miles Sanders, I like for San Francisco. There's a lot of backs pretty much this week that are in good spots that have reasons to where they can be one of the top scorers on the slate tonight, in my opinion.
We saw Gordon bust off a long one last week. Do you have a preference? I think they basically split it 50-50 essentially as far as Gordon versus Williams, or it's just equal shares of both and whoever gets there gets there.
They both split it 50-50, like you said. So to me, I'm favoring more so Javonte Williams because of the price point. He's a little bit cheaper, so he'll be a lot easier to fit in my lineups and get a couple of the wide receivers that I like a lot today and spend up. But both of them are. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. But I think Javonte might be a little bit of the lower own. Hopefully in tournaments, I think the ownership will flip. But we'll see how it goes when it gets closer up to lock.
Grant, we got to move and talk about receivers. We want to get to the chat's questions soon enough as well. What up, chat? Like, subscribe, turn on notifications, fire off your questions. If we have not talked about somebody, you want us to elaborate something else as far as a stack, whatever you want to ask. Devin's going to compile that question. We're going to get as many chat questions in as possible. Anything you want to add there, Grant, as far as running backs or somebody else that maybe we did not acknowledge just yet for whatever reason?
Now let's just go to wide receiver.
All right. It's all yours, man. Open it up. And it's the same deal. Like as far as the ownership, it's going to be the mid to upper tier, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen just feels like an absolute rock. He just gets so many targets, so many looks every single game. And now he's facing Dallas. Feels like such a stud today. Lamb, of course, on the other side. Lamb, Cooper, Allen. Those are our three highest owned projected guys all in the same game. Cooper Kupp just seems too cheap for whatever reason. Chase is kind of like an interesting cheapie to kind of make stuff work on DK as well. Your thoughts as far as receivers at the top as far as ownership?
I mean, all their ownerships make sense, and I'm playing a ton of them. I mean, it's really simple. That game, I'm real pissed that Dallas played in a solo game the first week because now everyone knows how they're going to be the exact same team they were last year. So this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think a not terrible way to get off the chalk is to play a little bit of Guyton. Like, is that I haven't talked through this with anyone, but I've been kind of looking at it. He got 5 targets last week. Am I missing something that he's going to be 0% owned pretty much and 3.1K?
I think Wilson is probably the more interesting guy in that game, the other side for Dallas.
Everyone thinks Cedric Wilson's going to be the better guy at the opposite side, but
I don't know if he's going to grab that much ownership unless our ownership is wrong.
He's 8.5% owned.
That's not. I mean, that's a huge number. It's not that big.
I mean, for a guy that can end up with very few points, I mean, it's not like they just have 3 wide receivers to throw to, and that's all they throw to. They have Schultz, they have Jarwin, but they use both of them the entire game. They run 2 running back sets all the time with Pollard and Zeke the first game, and they didn't end up running the ball that much because they called off like 14 of the 25 rushing plays they called. Like, they're probably going to run the ball more this game, and they're going to run.
Zeke is a good play. Not to cut you off, but we didn't really talk about Zeke. We kind of mentioned him in passing, but he's an interesting like pivot away from all the receivers people like in that game. But go ahead.
Yeah, no. So it's real simple. Like, it's not going to be the same. Everyone assumes that it's going to be the same week after week. No, it's not going to be the same. And they don't need to run 3 wide receiver sets that much. Like, Gallup was great because he was a fantastic wide receiver. Cedric Wilson's all right. But there's no guarantee that they're going to be running 3 wide receiver sets because they have 2 running backs and 2 tight ends they like to use. And they're going to be running the ball more, which means they probably bring in multiple tight end sets more. So this is just a spot where I don't really like Cedric Wilson at 3.1K at 10% ownership. Like, Guyton has potentially a bigger ceiling. We saw him hit huge gains last year. Like, he had 3 touchdowns over 50 yards last year. We could absolutely see it again. There's going to be a lot of passing in this game. There's going to be a lot of points scored. And Guyton's a guy that may end up giving you the same amount of points as Cedric Wilson, or could potentially end up with 20 more points than Cedric Wilson.
It's interesting because last week we had a slew of 3K guys. Like, you just kind of rotate through them, right? And some hit, most didn't. This week we don't really have that. And I guess Guyton is one of them. You know, of course, Wilson's another one. Another one that did not get there, did not hit last week was DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Landry is not Landry. Beckham is out. Schwartz may or may not play. It's just interesting how lineup construction works, and like there's not a lot of cheapies at receiver that you feel at least decent about, and then maybe the ownership does kind of like build on a guy like Wilson, and it's higher than we're projecting. Andre, what are your thoughts here as far as this conversation? Are you in on Guyton as a tournament flyer?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more because I wasn't on him originally. I was really geared towards honestly just being lower owned on both those receivers as a whole, as far as not playing Guyton at all and coming in way under the field on Cedric Wilson, like playing only like half of the field of him because I just felt like, to me, it wasn't necessary. I don't know if that and can they have tournament winning upside? Yes, they can, definitely. In that matchup, in that game environment with that total, definitely. But I don't know how much I really want to target them. I'm also trying to limit my exposure to that game and not go over the field on it, and target some other games that I like. So that's going to be the most popular game in my opinion on the slate. Donald, I like the Peoples-Jones call. I think he's still good this week, even against Houston. And one guy actually, just like Grant, I was thinking about this, Bryan Edwards. Like, what do you guys think about him against Pittsburgh? I know Pittsburgh has a tough secondary, and we know how talented Bryan Edwards is as a receiver, but it's just, like I said, it's just a tough matchup. Do you think he's still viable?
I'd much rather go with Renfro.
You'd much rather go with Renfro?
Yeah, I like Renfro today. We didn't really talk about him too much, but he's super cheap. Pittsburgh, not great versus the slot. We shouldn't have seen that Carr likes to target him. Like, he can get there with just receptions, and if he gets 1 touchdown, he can pretty much make value by receptions. Like, it's a spot where he could end up with 9-10 targets, ended up with 9 last week. He's a guy that is virtually unowned on the slate and one of the cheapest guys. You talk about the fact that all mid-tier running backs are going to be super heavily owned. Guess what? You can play Renfro, Guyton, and then stack up a game and play some high-priced running backs and have an entirely different lineup.
Exactly. That's actually a good call.
I'm actually doing that right now. I just got real excited.
Andre, your favorite receiver on Cincinnati?
Ooh, see, I wanted to say Jamar Chase, but then as I started looking more and more into it, I think it's going to be Tyler Boyd at low ownership. I think he's gonna have a big game today. And he obviously, I think Jamar has the best matchup out of the two. But Tyler Boyd, to me, I think just stands out. He's the cheapest, but I think he also is going to go have probably like a multiple touchdown game today against Cincinnati. Against Chicago. The secondary is not what it used to be. I think they got a bunch of new guys on their team that are still working their way into the system. So I definitely like targeting them for sure. Those 3 receivers, though, you can't go wrong with either one or all of them, in my opinion.
Grant, you can say none if you want. Woods or Cup?
Cup.
Andre, you can say none if you want as well. Beasley or Sanders as like a mid-tier cheapie. You like BBO? Okay. You have a favorite receiver on Pittsburgh? You mentioned Big Ben, that there's 3 options there, 3 big options as far as receiver. Who's your favorite?
Chase Claypool. I think he's going to have 2 touchdowns today.
Grant, this is always the toughest one. I'm leaving it for you. Metcalf or Lockett?
That is
yeah, I think it's Lockett. Honestly, I know that recency bias is a thing, but Lockett's still projected to come in at lower ownership. Everyone still thinks that DK is great, which, let's be honest, he is. But I don't really care. Like, they're coming in at the same ownership. Lockett's cheaper. Lockett has realistically higher ceiling than Metcalf because he can go for multiple long games.
Let's move on to tight end. We're kind of short in time, and I want to get the chat questions as possible. Does somebody have a strong take in this? I think I'm in the minority on this. I have a slight lean to Fant versus Higbee as far as tight ends, especially with the absence of Judy, the matchup there versus Jacksonville. Higbee versus Fant, basically the same price on DK, and it's kind of the quandary where I'm landing as far as cash. I'm sure a lot of other people are landing there as well. Andre, you have a take here as far as Higbee versus Fant?
I like both of them, honestly, but I'm going to probably go with Fans because the situation's a little bit better. But I think both of them options are good. One other person I like in that price point, in that price range, is like I said, Gronk, who's going to be lesser owned than probably both of them.
Yeah.
And I think he's someone that we should definitely target for sure and get in your lineups, especially with part of those Tom Brady stacks.
He absolutely crushed on national TV. Looked like prime Gronk, and like I don't want to say nobody's playing him, but like 5% is playing him. Higbee and Fant, we have a 15% give or take each, and Gronk we currently have 5%. Do you have a thought there, Grant? And you want to expand as far as, Darren Waller saw his 19 targets last week. Obviously, probably playing from behind here versus Tampa. Tampa, you're essentially forced to throw, and on Fanduel is a much more appealing price. It's got to make stuff work, or you actually have the salary. DK, it's hard to make work. Of course, you can. Thoughts as far as any of the tight ends we've talked about, or anybody else you want to bring into the conversation?
I mean, my tight end pool is pretty condensed. It's Higbee, it's Fant, it's Cook, it's Waller, it's Pitts, and it's Gronk. Like, and they're chalky. I don't care. I'm just playing them. Like, they're the ones I see having a potential big game. I think Pitts is far too low owned considering his potential upside. It's not like he wasn't targeted. It's not like he wasn't on the field a lot. It's not like he wasn't being put out wide or in the slot. He's a guy that's going to be heavily involved in the passing game just because he didn't hit week 1. Like, I've been waiting for this ever since the end of that game. I'm like, all right, he's going to go way too low on week 2. Yes, he got a price increase, but I don't care. Did he even get a price increase? He got a little bit of one, right?
Mm-hmm. We're in lightning round. We have no time to talk about such things. We got 6 minutes before we step aside to make way for the next batch. And of course, again, we're all the way up here until 1 o'clock. Take you guys up the lock. No reason to go anywhere else. Hit the like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. Going to get your questions in just a second. By the way, Ridley, I meant to ask this to you, Andre. You keep talking about Tampa. I feel like Ridley's a guy who might see 20 targets today. Like, that would not shock me. Like, why not? Like, just keep chucking it to him. Is he somebody you're running back with Tampa? I presume you are.
Yeah, him and Mike Davis are the only ones that I have in my pool to run back with Atlanta.
Pitts?
Back on Atlanta. Oh, yeah, Kyle Pitts too as well. Thank you for reminding me. I do have him as well. But Ridley's the top target for sure. That secondary, I think they're a little bit shaky. I think they're gonna have some time to get together. Probably knock the Super Bowl rust off a little bit for a couple of weeks and get back into playing all these games. So I think that this is the week where you could roster Ridley. I think he has a bounce back week in a big way. And Matt Ryan's going to target him a lot.
Give me a couple of your favorite stacks, Grant. Game stacks, quarterback to receiver stacks, however you want to work it.
All 4 of the late game. All the late games.
How about yourself, Andre?
Obviously, yeah, all 4 late games, but Matt Stafford to Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods. I like that a lot, but also paired him with Jared Everett. Ben Roethlisberger to Chase Claypool is one of my favorite stacks. And even if you want to put Najee Harris in there, you can as well. And Joe Burrow to Tyler Boyd with T. Higgins or Jamar Chase.
Do you want to mention one more time as far as the Yahoo promo we have going on? Use the promo code Grinders25 for a free $25 bonus on your first deposit. And again, the overlay is absolutely lurking right now. Let me give it a refresh, but I think we're still We're at 27,000 spots claimed. That is 66,000 spots claimed in a contest that is already rake free. Like, good Lord, why are you not playing this contest? I know they're the sponsor, but I swear to you, I am maxed out. I am playing 150. Whatever my mouth is. Like, there's no other reason not to be playing this. I mean, seriously, this is where your first place should be stopping. $15 flat payout. If you bink it, you get 100K. You get a live final ticket as well. All right, lightning round, boys. I'm going to go back and forth, just bouncing back and forth. Grant, you're batting first. Fanduel tournaments, 4 p.m. only slate. Your favorite running backs in the 4 p.m. only slate.
Eckler, Carson.
What's Dean's non-DFS bad take for the day? Cheddar cheese is gross. All right, so Andre, full point PPR. You like Jonathan Taylor or AJ Brown?
Jonathan Taylor. Well, actually, no, AJ Brown.
How much Justin Fields is too much Justin Fields? Well, more than 1%. We're not playing Justin Fields. Like, the first thing you have to do is get on the field. And unfortunately, they're not letting him play because you got to see what you have in 39-year-old Andy Dalton. Grant, DK, you never know. He might be a late bloomer. Roadhouse, the DK cash flex 5K or less. This is kind of like where I landed and where everybody else is landing too. And, Chase is kind of where I'm at. I'm running 4 receivers right now. I make more than one iteration, but I like Chase as a 5K cash guy. Do you have anybody better than that? Anybody else with an interesting conversation?
I'm not playing cash this week.
Okay, never mind. We'll go with mine. There you go. Well, I ask you this question, Grant. DK tournaments, you like DJ Moore or Melvin Gordon in the flex?
DJ Moore.
Andre, DK tournaments, is it a Teddy Bridgewater week? If not a Teddy Bridgewater week, maybe a Tyrod, a T-Mobile week?
Tyrod surprised me last week, but I would say Teddy B all day. I think he has a chance to shock a lot of people in this matchup.
Grant, who are you running it back with in your Ram stack?
Pittman, Taylor, like, I don't know, just whoever.
Feel good about any of them? I don't feel good about any of them.
No, and I mean, you don't necessarily have to run it back, but like any of the wide receivers, Pittman, Paris, or Pascal can get in the end zone, obviously.
Let's see. Oh yeah, they're asking about Guyton. So somebody else is asking about Guyton as well. Let's see. Are you concerned about the rain potentially in Tampa, Andre? We'll see what Roth has to say, but I haven't seen anything like dramatic as far as that.
Yeah, no, I'm not at all.
Grant, any love for the Miami stack? Or anybody
it's
in
not
Miami?
terrible. Like, I'd play it more on Super Draft where Tua's 1.55x multiplier and Waddle's 1.5x.
All right, pick 2 of these guys. Let's see, 2 running backs would you pick for cash? Montgomery, Gordon, Carson, or Harris? That's Harris for Pittsburgh. Montgomery, Gordon, Carson. I think it's not Gordon. It's probably Carson and Harris, right? Over Montgomery, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
What's your take on Zach Pascal? Mine's indifference at best. You guys like Pascal?
Don't play him. No.
Not a huge fan, but again, if you want to run it back, go ahead.
I'll run back with Jonathan Taylor.
DK cash last piece, Beasley or Chase. I prefer Chase, but
Same.
Whatever. I mean, is anybody have a thought on it's close?
I'd say Beasley because I know he's gonna get peppered with targets.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say you're wrong. It's close. All right, we got to step aside and get out of here. Grant, you have a take? What's taking things down today? Like Andre said, don't celebrate too early. There's a lot of games in the back half that are going to get a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you're winning money this morning, you will be losing money later on. Like, it's just a fact.
Andre, give us a final thought as far as the slate.
I think make sure I like double stacking today. So if you want to get some of those in, do that for sure. I think that again, Russell Wilson paired with Jared Everett coming at low ownership is taking it down, pairing with one of either Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf to run it back with the guy from the opposite end too on Tennessee, probably AJ Brown. So I think that takes down the Millie today. And hope everyone wins some money today.
Yes, sir. Yeah, do check out that Yahoo contest, our Yahoo promo there in the chat. We appreciate y'all watching. I was going to say hit your like button on the way out, but y'all aren't going anywhere. Erik and Ben are on layaway. They're coming up right around the corner, taking you guys all the way up to lock. Enjoy the football today, boys. And have a good time. Appreciate Devin producing the show. Thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications. That was Andre. That was Grant. That was football. I was Dean. We're out of here. Holler.
We're here back at the Fantasy Bar. 6 plays for you for week 2 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including a couple wide receivers I think overlooked here. My favorite quarterback wide receiver pairing, some workhorse running backs at a discount, my favorite value play of the week, and of course, my favorite play of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 2 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack. 6 guys fresh off the tap for you on FanDuel and DraftKings. Thank you, as always, for stopping by the Fantasy Bar. Now, before we get into plays, as always, some housekeeping. First thing, make sure you click that thumbs up button on YouTube. That is the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar, and I greatly appreciate it. Next, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Get notified when the videos are coming out. Also doing a Yahoo 6-pack. So basically, giving out a 12-pack of plays each and every week. So make sure you guys go and check that video out as well. Should be out sometime tomorrow. Lastly, for all of my sports betting friends out there, whether you're a veteran, whether you're new, guys, go and check out scoresandodds.com/beer. The link in the description of the video, click that. Go and check out all the information over there. Can compare odds across a ton of different sports books to find the best price. Also, premium picks. If you don't have time to dig around all the information, hey, we got you covered there as well, including my favorite bets of the week. Can find those at scoresandodds.com/beer. All right, let's look at week 2. Week 1 was a disaster for a lot of us. Week 1 in the 6-pack was not great. Let's turn the page to week 2 here. Let's start at the wide receiver position with Mike Evans of the Buccaneers. So I love this spot for Evans. Now, it's easy to say Antonio Brown, who I love and was great in week 1. It's easy to say Chris Godwin, who was also good in week 1, but let's not forget about Mike Evans. And I think that's what's going to happen here in the DFS community. We know week 1, everyone has all the answers. If a guy sucked in week 1, we can't play him in week 2. A lot of people are going to go to Brown at similar or cheaper prices. Mike Evans is the guy you want to go with this weekend. Tampa Bay, 32.25 projected team total here. We know this Atlanta defense not very good. Jalen Hurts and company just put 30 points on them. So Tampa Bay basically going to be able to do whatever they want, and you can use multiple receivers here with Tom Brady. But Evans will be the lowest owned here, just as big, if not higher of a ceiling than both of the other guys in Atlanta. Not only they struggle in week 1, we can look at the course of the entire 2020 season. There's not a team in the NFL that gave up more fantasy production to the wide receiver position than the Atlanta Falcons. Love the bounce back spot here for Mike Evans against the Atlanta Falcons. All right, let's get you another bounce back guy. Let's go to the running back position. We're rolling with Najee Harris of the Steelers. Now, Najee, very popular in week 1 against Buffalo. Let everyone down in week 1. Don't be the guy or gal that falls for recency bias here. We can take advantage of this in this matchup with the Raiders. When you look at snap counts, this guy played every single snap the Steelers played on offense. Let me say that again. Every single snap. We don't get that out of guys at this price point playing the workhorse role. Think about the NFL right now. Not many workhorse running backs left, and we're paying low 6s for a workhorse against the Raiders. Sign me up for that. Raiders bottom 5 in both rushing touchdowns allowed, fantasy points allowed. The Baltimore ground game looked good against them here in week 1. Pittsburgh, nice home favorites here. I think they ride their workhorse here. You need to do the same here in week 2 with Najee Harris. All right, I promised you some value. We're going to go to the tight end position, and we'll roll with Cole Kmet of the Bears. So I think this is a great spot to save some money. We don't have a Travis Kelce on this slate, so tight end we can spend down a little bit. And Kmet's certainly one of the guys I want to look at. In fact, my favorite value tight end, 7 targets in that week 1 game against the Rams. The Rams a much tougher defense than what he's going to see here with Cincinnati. Bengals bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. And I really like this game overall, both sides of it. I think this one's got sneaky stack potential to it. It's not the 55, 56s that we have in some of these other games. This is that game that flies under the radar a little bit. I think there are stacks available on both sides, but I do like Cole Kmet here as a value option in both your tournaments and your cash games. All right, let's get you a quarterback next. We'll roll with Matthew Stafford of the Rams. So Stafford looked great. First game with the Rams, no problem in that game versus Chicago. 3 touchdowns, very efficient. Didn't have to do a whole lot here. Well, I think this Indianapolis team is going to put up a little bit more of a fight, put up more points than the Bears did in that week 1 game, which is going to force Stafford to have to do a little bit more, which is going to help raise his ceiling. We saw him approach 30 DraftKings points already without having to do a whole lot. This Colts team just gave up 4 touchdowns through the air to Russell Wilson. We saw Tyler Lockett have a big game. And you think about this team, the beauty of rolling Matthew Stafford, you have guys like Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, Robert Woods. We saw the emergence of Van Jefferson have a big game. If you want to go all the way down there, even Deshaun Jackson or even a Darrell Henderson will catch some balls out of the backfield. The point is, when you get a guy like this, you can use him multiple ways in multiple lineups with different ways of stacking him. Love the prospects here from Matthew Stafford this week against the Colts. All right, let's stay with the Rams. I'm going to pick my favorite out of that bunch. I like them all. We're going to go with the guy that's probably going to be the lowest owned. Similar to our Mike Evans pick, we're rolling Robert Woods of the Rams. Now, look, I get it. Cooper Kupp is the guy in this offense, and he's too cheap. No problems going with him. Higbee, big game, played all the snaps at the tight end position for the Rams, but Woods will be the guy that's forgotten in this offense. And let's not forget about how good Robert Woods is. Very cheap here, especially on DraftKings at just 5,700. So we'll get very low ownership here in a good spot. I mentioned all those teammates. Those are going to be the guys that get all the ownership here. Those are going to be the guys that get paired with Matthew Stafford. So this gives you a way to get a little bit different here with Robert Woods, and plenty of offense and plenty of fantasy points to go around against this team. We mentioned Seattle having their way. Both Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf had big games. I think you see that again here with the Rams. So again, no problem with Cooper Kupp, no problem with Tyler Higbee, but Robert Woods gives you that advantage here in tournaments on both Fanduel and DraftKings. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 2. But before we do that, we want to continue our Beast of the Week contest. Congrats to our winner last week. This is free to play. This is a thank you to you guys for hanging out and checking out the video every week. Again, make sure you go and check out the Yahoo video as well for 6 more plays that aren't just Yahoo plays. We're going to spotlight Yahoo and their pricing in that video, but it's more guys that I like across the week 2 landscape. So go check that out. But Beast of the Week contest, get in the comment section right below the video and guess fantasy points. We'll go with FanDuel this week for my favorite play of the week. The closest guess will win themselves a free month of RotoGrinders Premium. That's right, a chance to check everything out behind the scenes. If you're already a loyal subscriber, no problem. We'll send you a free RotoGrinders t-shirt. Let's wrap this baby up. Let's finish up week 2 strong with my favorite play, you know, Mass, the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast time. Oh, you one more running back, and my favorite play of the week is easy. I'm going out to the West Coast here. We're rolling with Chris Carson of Seattle, this week's Beast of the Week. I absolutely love this spot here for Chris Carson this week. I have no issues with the passing game. I think that's going to be the way a lot of people go. Russell Wilson, Lockett, Metcalf, we've talked about them a bunch here, but Carson, the guy I really want to cram into lineups here. Another guy, very much like Najee Harris, get a nice discount for a guy who's going to handle the majority of the work in that Seattle backfield. We also, very favorable spot here. Whenever we get a running back at home as a favorite, big total at 53.5, checking all the boxes there as far as game environment goes, and the matchup also ideal. We saw Tennessee absolutely dismantled by that Arizona offense here, and we look back to last season. We're talking about a team that's bottom 5 in both fantasy points and touchdowns allowed to the running back position. So Carson's involvement in the passing game has gotten a lot higher, and we know FanDuel really relies on those touchdowns here. I think Seattle going to score a bunch of points. I think Chris Carson finds the end zone not only once, we're going to go big, 2 touchdowns here for Chris Carson, making him easily my favorite play on the board.
What is going on, grinders? Welcome to week 2 of the GPP final takes, lineup HQ, crunch time, something leading up to lock. We're going to polish off our week 2 lineups here. I am Erik Beimfohr. You can find me on Twitter at Erik Beimfohr, as I will be the rest of the season. I am joined by Ben Gretch at YardsPerGretch on Twitter, and we're ready. We're brainstorming all these crazy ideas before the show and trying to figure out why we're reacting certain ways to certain things and why we're reacting other ways to different situations that seem very similar. Week 2 is just crazy. Ben, how are you feeling right now heading into week 2?
I'm feeling pretty good. I got my lineup set where I'm pretty comfortable with them. But yeah, I mean, I think you kind of just hit on the main point to me is that, like, we've seen 1 week. We talked about this last week, that this was going to happen after 1 week. There's a lot of certainty in something that should be extremely uncertain, right? Like one week in the NFL, anything can happen. We know that. And there's a lot of guys with like strong underlying roles that didn't have good weeks last week that are just being completely forgotten about. There's a lot of guys with strong underlying roles that didn't have good weeks last week that were trusting to bounce back almost certainly. And so, you know, they're projecting for really high ownership. There's a lot there that is, the logic doesn't necessarily follow across the slate, which I think creates a lot of opportunity for tournaments, obviously.
That's the big thing for me and what I've been, you know, we'll get into, and for everybody in the chat and everybody watching, we're definitely going to get into, you know, some more macro conversation about the slate, but also some micro, you know, players that we like. Obviously, we will get into some of the micro stuff, but the big thing and kind of what I've been talking about in any content and stuff I've been doing this week is just trying to understand. And I mean, maybe it's a fool's errand to even try to understand it, but gauging this market to like where some things, like a team looked, we were talking again before the show, a team looked horrible last week. The Steelers, right? Looked awful, but we're totally cool. The market is totally cool diving back in on the Steelers because of the perceived good matchup, you know, what have you. Short week for Vegas. I get it. But on the opposite side, we're not cool going back on the teams that also looked horrible, that we were probably even more excited about coming into the year. Like, we thought Tennessee was going to be good, right? On offense, at least. And everybody's like, oh my God, nope. Arthur Smith is gone. You know, it's over. Well, and then on the, you piggybacking that, Arthur Smith is in Atlanta, and we were excited about Atlanta, and I get the bad matchup for that, but now we're out on Atlanta too. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around basically like the situations that are most advantageous for us to kind of fade the market. Essentially, was there anything, you know, outside of those, or maybe one of those where you're kind of dialed in on?
I mean, there's a lot. We were talking before the show. I don't have as much Tennessee or Seattle as I want to, and partly because I do have a little exposure to Atlanta, certainly. I mean, like, we talked last week about Kyle Pitts being sort of a tough play for efficiency reasons, this and that. But then we saw the role that we sort of expected. It wasn't an absolute certainty. Nothing is, but sort of expected. He wasn't necessarily productive on that role. Their whole offense was horrible, and his price did go up. But like, now you're looking at Kyle Pitts this week, and it's like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, no one wants to play him at all. He's going to be under 5% this week just because he went up a little bit, and the role was there. I mean, I actually would argue for a tight end at a very volatile position, last week was a positive sign for him. And yet we're just not going to play him. I understand Tampa Bay, good defense, all of those things, but they also force teams to pass. I mean, we saw that with Dallas. Dallas came out throwing really heavy against them in the opener. So he's interesting. Ridley's interesting. Cincinnati's another one. Yeah, they were the most run heavy team in terms of, pass rate over expectation, against expectation in the league last week. And, Chicago's big D tackle, what's his name? Goldman is out. You're going to have probably Joe Mixon running a lot. I mean, I just think there's too much certainty, basically, that Cincinnati's going to run a ton against the Bears. Yeah. I mean, we know Andy Dalton sucks, but like, I love the Cincinnati receivers. They still got there last week. I mean, Jamar Chase did especially, but like, Burrow was efficient. There's only really room for that pass rate over expectations that to come back, right? If that comes up more, as efficient as their pass game actually did look when they threw pretty limited amounts of times, if anything happens in that game that flips the script a little, Cincinnati has to throw a little, T. Higgins is going to smash. Jamar Chase is going to smash. I like little like T. Higgins, Darnell Mooney, mini stacks or correlation plays, whatever.
Yep.
Cole Kmet in that game. I mean, that's one that it looks like nobody really wants to play that game either. I mean, there's just so many games. Like the guy that right when we jumped on that I was saying to you, I mean, Najee Harris is one that I'm like really skeptical of. Like, I'm somebody who doesn't do a ton of DFS research, but in terms of like, I'm doing a lot of seasonal stuff. Then late in the week, I'm coming around and I'm looking at ownership. I'm looking at the stuff that is on RotoGrinders. I see he's the highest projected owned player in the entire slate. And I'm sitting here going, I don't see a lot of scenarios where he's, one of the top scoring running backs. I think he can, the 100% snaps matters. The matchup's great. He can absolutely have a big game. He does have a ceiling, but like, I'm comfortable. And I understand price is an important part of that equation, but like, you have that. And then on the flip side, you have Christian McCaffrey, after looking absolutely amazing, being sub 12%. And again, price, massive difference. But like to talk about like flipping the build, finding different ways to do things, you have to be really, really certain in the 2v2s when you talk about like going from Harris to McCaffrey, that the other side is gaining you a ton of projected points. And I'm not sure we can be that certain on the other side of those 2v2s.
Exactly. And we were talking, how many slates do you think the rest of this, it's only week 2, right? How many slates do you think the rest of the season we'll be able to come on here and say you will be contrarian playing Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Hopkins, Stephon Diggs, all the superstars, right? All the guys that we were talking about last week because we had infinite value, right? Now we don't, like, I have some value that I like, but we don't really have much guys on the super cheap end. So now, like, if you watched last week, kind of what we talked about was this idea of this kind of mid-range, right? Where like you could live in this 6 to 7K range, like at every position, basically last week, be contrarian, maybe even get more upside than what the chalky build was. And you have like all like 5% or less own players, even though you played like a good team. This week, that's what the field is doing, right? Go look across. If you're in lineup HQ and you go scroll across, Najee Harris, 6K, Chris Carson, 6K, Amari Cooper, 6K, Keenan Allen, 7K, CeeDee Lamb, 6K, right? And on and on and on. And all those quarterbacks, right? Dak Prescott, 6,800, Justin Herbert, 6,700, et cetera, et cetera. So like everyone is living in the exact same ranges again. And like, I get the bad matchup also, but like Christian McCaffrey seems pretty good to me. Like now we're out on him. We just talked about last week, like the whole narrative around him was how good he was for fantasy. He didn't score a touchdown. He didn't get a bonus, and he almost scored 30 fantasy points on DraftKings. So like the floor is there, and you just need a little bit of run good in a seemingly bad matchup. On the opposite side of that matchup, Alvin Kamara, I might be the most bullish on Alvin Kamara out of like anybody in the league. They basically didn't play the second half. He had 4 targets on 20 Jameis passes and 18 carries. I mean, we're about to see Alvin Kamara have a CMC level workload. It was just last week was kind of, one of those games. So I'm really interested in this, in the CMCs, the Kamaras, Dalvin to a lesser extent, but Dalvin also makes it interesting in a really fun game environment as kind of a bring back or something like that. So you kind of said you're locked in on your lineups. Are those guys, those elite running backs, some guys you're prioritizing?
I am. I mean, it's not the only way I'm building. I don't know if I have much Dalvin in my big lineups. I have a little Kamara. I built a lineup with McCaffrey and Kamara in the same game. I mean, we talk about the tough matchup. These guys catch so many passes or have the ability to catch so many passes. People don't like to play running backs on opposite sides. They're their best receivers on both teams. I mean, McCaffrey is arguably the best one on Carolina. I'm obviously a huge DJ Moore fan. I don't think you can argue that Kamara is clearly for the Saints. So whichever team's trailing is going to need to throw, whichever running back is leading, probably going to be a big part of the ground game. That game could be gross. It could go slow. New Orleans ran the ball a ton last week. But I also think like there's another example of 1 week. I mean, just the game environment that New Orleans created last week was so dependent on the types of drives that aren't sustainable. 2 different 15-play drives in the first half. They completely sliced play volume in the entire first half. Like the Packers only ran 17 plays in the entire first half. That's difficult to do. They're probably not going to be able to do that again. And look, I think Carolina and the Saints both have good defenses, but I mean, like Lattimore, I'm actually kind of worried about DJ Moore, who I love. He's going to have probably a lot of Lattimore today. And then you have Christian McCaffrey coming out of the backfield, running these combo routes. He looked amazing last week. I was sitting here on this show last week saying maybe he only plays 80% of the snaps instead of, even more. We don't know for sure. Christian McCaffrey looked like, again, peak Christian McCaffrey. Like he has only ever looked. He's never not looked that good. He is a cheat code in fantasy football. Like I like Kamara too. I like Cook too. For me, like the fact that you can get Christian McCaffrey, who is not just on a different level than every other fantasy player from like his profile, from his receiving profile to everything else. I think he's like 2 levels up from even Kamara, who like Kamara has the same type of touch mix and touch profile, but like McCaffrey is he's just different, right?
He is.
The Twitter meme. He's just different. Like if he scores, no one like literally all it takes is one. They're saying Lattimore is out. That's interesting.
Yep.
I missed that. But if McCaffrey scores one time, like he has a ceiling that's unmatched. That's like literally all it takes. If he scores multiple times, he's a guarantee. Like he has to be in the winning lineup because he's gonna give you 20 plus on the. Yeah. It's like peak David Johnson, peak Le'Veon Bell. Remember all these guys that we had to jam every single week? Like that's where we're at. He's under 10K. I would play him at freaking 15K.
The bad matchup just makes it less likely for efficiency. But when you have that voluminous role, right, you just need to luck box a couple of touchdowns. They could only score 14 points if he gets both of the touchdowns. And actually, if they're, like you said, if they're losing, if the bad matchup is so bad that they're losing and he catches 12 balls, like that's good. Like that's a good thing. So it is interesting that Lattimore is out, I will say. Not necessarily for CMC, but for the game. You know, we were kind of talking about this game, obviously, mainly as it relates to those two backs. But anything that can boost that game environment, I think, is generally a good thing for both of them if we can get a little bit more back and forth. One thing I am going to kind of hop over, a bunch of people in the chat were kind of asking about defenses. And I think that's actually an interesting discussion because last week we saw, and I feel like people are falling into this trap again. Last week, the Falcons were the super chalk defense because they were cheap and they just project, I don't claim to know how the sausage gets made on the defensive projections, but like sometimes you get these really bad defenses that project well point per dollar. And I feel like we talked about that at the end of the show last week, that like, if I'm playing tournaments, like I'm not playing a chalk Falcons defense against at least a reasonably good offense. Like I don't want to play the most popular just because it's cheap. Right. So people are kind of saying like, oh, the defense doesn't matter. Anybody can score, whatever. You know, there's not that big of a difference between the defenses. I agree, but there is a big difference in ownership on those defenses. You know what I mean? You want to attack a low owned, high upside defense. So the people are mentioning like the Jets and stuff. Like, I don't want to play, you know, if like the Browns were 2K or something like that, maybe we'd be like, oh God, do we have to play, you know, the Browns against the Texans? But we're talking about the worst defenses in the league in like, I don't want to attack the Patriots with the defense. They're not going to throw that much. They're not going to turn the ball over. Like, I don't really get it. So, is that kind of your general approach to defense? And while we're on this, is there any that we're kind of jumping out to?
2 years, it seemed to have been a lot more sharp in that regard, the defense pricing. So sometimes you have to make these gross plays. I think I played the Jets in a couple spots just because I really like the lineup, and their ownership isn't like through the roof. No one, there's no one at 15%. At RotoGrinders, the Jets are leading it at 10.7% expected ownership. So that's reasonable. I played some of the Steelers who are also chalky, but the one that I liked was the Eagles. I mean, we know Jimmy Garoppolo can make some mistakes. It's not one that I love, but they're at home, San Francisco, second straight road game. I don't necessarily want to target the San Francisco offense with the opposing D, but you know, the Eagles as a team looked pretty good. They might put them into more passing situations than you know we would expect immediately looking at that matchup. So I played some Eagles, and I played some Cardinals. Cardinals are the other D that I was like, they might be just better than we expect. Those are all projected like top 8 highest ownership, and I don't like that. I like having a couple that are low to every point you made. But this week it does look like it's going to be fairly spread out. So I was just kind of mixing and matching.
Yeah, I like. I've been spending up a little bit more, maybe over the course of the last year, maybe 2 years, because everybody has caught on, right? Like, oh, I can just get a better player if I go down to the 2200 defense or the 2K defense last week, and the pricing has also gotten a little better, right? All those things that we used to like, we might have gotten a situation this week, like, I don't know, I'm trying to look really quick, like the Saints might be super cheap. I guess they're on the road, but you know what I mean? There would be a home favorite against a shaky offense, and they would be like 2,400 for whatever reason, right? Maybe they had a bad week last week. That doesn't really happen anymore. So I like to kind of pay up a little bit or play somebody in a game. Like maybe it's a game we expect scoring, you know, so I kind of like the Chargers actually, which maybe sounds a little bit crazy, but if the game is just going to be passing back and forth, like anything can happen, right? Yep. Like, and Lyle, you have Lyle Collins out, and it just crazy stuff happens in these.
That's a big reason I like the Cardinals. Like if their offense looks sharp again, their D actually looked really good last week against the Titans. And then, you know, force Kirk Cousins on the road to start throwing around. I mean, I think the Cardinals are probably my favorite play, especially when you consider ownership. They're under 7%. They're the fifth most chalky projected team, but not like super high. That like to your point, like you want games actually that have some scoring. The points against part of defensive scoring is a little bit lower. It's perfectly fine. Like that is sort of the underrated element of defense. I think is looking at the defense you're choosing's offense. Can that offense put teams in a bind where they have to throw away more than they're comfortable? And you want a lot of pass volume for the opposing offense when for your fantasy defense, right? You want to get sacks and interceptions late.
Then the only other one kind of piggybacking on that, we can move on from defense, lower owned stuff. I mean, I like some of the chalkier ones too, like even like the Browns, because shocker, I'm not buying the Texans thing. If anything, I'm just lower on the Jags now. But is the Bills. It's a perfect synopsis of them too. The perfect synopsis of what you said, and then you have combined the Miami offensive line is really bad. I kind of like Tua, but he still will make mistakes. And like you said, I mean, what better team that can put some pressure on the opposing offense?
Especially like if you're not, like, for me, I had a challenge this week because I was playing a lot of McCaffrey and stuff. So I was having a hard time paying up a defense. I love that point though, especially if you're not playing McCaffrey, if you're down in the cheaper running back range to kind of build like more common to what everyone else is going to build. I love the idea of like paying up for the Bills at a low ownership.
Yeah. And the chat even mentions the Bengals. I think the Bengals are totally fine too. I mean, it's Andy Dalton. I mean, that offense and that offensive line is really bad, but all this conversation I think was actually really helpful because people if that doesn't tell you like, dude, just play, like, you don't need to play the chalky one, right? People are like, oh, I just got to spend down. No, we just went through like 10 defenses in 3 minutes that you can play, and they're totally reasonable upside bets, and they can't all be popular, right? So I think that's kind of the theme of defense for me. So let's flip it over now. We talked a little bit about kind of the macro stuff with, underreacting or overreacting to week one, which I think is kind of really funny. One game that's fascinating to me in terms of, it seems everybody's doing the I'm not going to overreact thing. Generally, like with the Steelers, they're kind of picking and choosing, which we went over right there. We're not worried about Najee, but we are worried about Kyle Pitts or whatever. Okay. Yeah. The game that the two teams were like two of the most impressive offenses in the league last week that is not going to be owned generally is the 49ers and the Eagles. Yeah. The Eagles were maybe one of the most impressive teams to me. Good matchup for sure, but were maybe one of the most impressive teams to me. The 49ers are the 49ers. I know that they had maybe the craziest week one in terms of, guys being inactive and Brandon Ayuk situation and what have you, but we know that they're going to score points too, like on anybody. It doesn't really matter. And so that game to me looks like super appealing. You also have some 49ers defensive injuries. And there's really not much ownership on that game. What do you think about that game?
Yeah, I mean, I have multiple Jalen Hurts stacks in single entries, and which is the bulk of what I play. I love it. I mean, completely on with what you just said. I do like Devonta Smith ahead of Rager, ahead of Quez. They did their routes and their usage was pretty hierarchical, which isn't true of every team. Mm-hmm. And so the pricing sort of makes sense for the Philadelphia receivers. You can play their tight ends if you want. I did some Hurts Smith, I think it's easy to be like, well, you can get Rager for really cheap. And I think I maybe did do a Hurts Rager as well. Or even Watkins, but Watkins only ran routes on like, I don't have the number right in front of me, but it was like 50 or 60% of dropbacks. And then Rager was in this like 75% range. And then Smith was the one full-time guy. So it was very hierarchical, and Smith is the one that was getting a lot of downfield work. Rager had the TD on a bubble screen. Watkins' first few catches were all quick bubble screens. That was the one thing about Hurts week one that was a little interesting, was he had a very low average intended air yards, very low passing ADOT. We want to see him be more vertical. If he is, I think it is Devonta Smith, based on what we saw in week one, that is going to be like the biggest beneficiary. So I did some Hurts, Devonta, and bring it back with Kittle. Like, everyone's going to want to play Debo on that. Nobody's playing Kittle. If they're going to pay up for tight end, you definitely want to get some Waller in your life too, because like his role was massive, and he's going underpriced because people are, already worried about salary, pay down a tight end. But like Waller was a wide receiver one. I mean, he had 19 targets or whatever it was, like just absolutely absurd usage. Yeah. 200 air yards, more tight end air yards for a player in a single game than any tight end, including Waller, including Kelsey, including anyone, had in a game all of last year. I mean, Waller, legitimate wide receiver usage, right? Yeah. Kittle at the same time didn't run a lot of routes last week. They kept him in to block a ton. they were ahead. If they trail at all, I would think they would try to utilize him more as a receiver. There's certainly that's a good overreaction one is Kittle. So yeah, I like that game.
I like that game a lot. I like both of those elite tight ends a lot. It's not that they're going to be 1% or anything like that, but on a week without Travis Kelce, without any real punt tight ends to speak of, right? Like we had some last week that didn't go perfectly. Obviously, our boy Tyler Croft, who just watch, he's going to score on the freaking.
I know. Oh, he's having 2 touchdowns this week. I told everyone to cut him and move on in seasonal. I did throw him in one GPP lineup. I'm not.
I got one punt that we'll get to a little bit later, and it's even more gross, I think, than Tyler Croft. But like you have these again, because going back to this roster construction thing, right? Everybody's kind of living in this mid tier, which sends you to the best projections at tight end, right? Higbee, Fant, Cook in this exciting game. I think personally, people will even maybe toss in some of the Cowboys guys because that game is so appealing. And like you have Waller and Kittle on a week, again, no Kelce and no real punts. And like, it's not that hard to get them. You can get those guys if you want them. So you get leverage on the two, guys that we were taking at the 2-3 turn and in fantasy drafts all year. And this 10th or 11th round pick, right? I know the seasonal is what it is, but like sometimes I like to apply that. I'm like, everyone's going to play this guy I was taking in the 11th round and this guy that in the 2nd round, not that much more expensive. Nobody is going to play because of 1 week.
Absolutely.
So that, speaking of Kittle and that game, last week, Ben gave you the smash bet in Keenan Allen. I remember I hadn't bet Keenan Allen last week, and you're talking during the show about that, kind of the volume you expected for Keenan Allen, which came true. And I'm looking up, I'm like, what's his receptions prop? And it's 5.5. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this is the lock of the city. The lock of the slate. Mine this week is actually from this game. And maybe I'm, buying too much into that role from last week, but Devonta Smith, I feel like is just kind of a smash in this offense. I believe in that hierarchy, like you were talking about. I think they even took their foot off the gas late in that game because they were up, they weren't winning by 30, but they had that game in hand. And I think we haven't even seen, the best of Devonta Smith. His yardage prop is, I believe, 49.5. It might be up to 50.5 now in some spots. But if you have not signed up for BetMGM, make sure to go to BetMGM, bet this Devonta Smith 49.5 yards or 50.5 yards. And if you bet $10, you get $200 using promo code GRINDERSBET. $200 free for a $10 bet on Devonta Smith. You win, now you got a couple of $100 extra bucks in your pocket. That's mine this week. I got a few different props, but Devonta Smith was one that just based on that usage, like I'm really buying that usage and maybe that doesn't continue, but I like the spot. I like the game, and that just seems way too low for him.
Yeah. Love it. I love it.
All right. I'm going to get into a gross one.
I mean, I got a couple players that are sort of, we've been alluding to all these, like, week 1, we forgot about him. We talked about Pitts. I think Mike Evans on the other side is an obvious one that like, I'm actually concerned about him for season long, but no one's going to play him. I mean, he's going to be pretty, and you get this Pitts Evans correlation. That's pretty easy.
And Chad is talking about the Bucks, and I think Evans is a good microcosm of the, but like, I mean, they're going to score points. You got
to play the Bucks, I think, this week, and no one, and like, it's not being as discussed as I sort of would have expected. I think they're going to get sort of probably late swapped onto a decent amount. They're in the afternoon, right? If I'm not mistaken. Am I making that up? Okay.
If people are drawing dead, people are drawing dead, they might swap to the Bucks off the Cowboys or whatever. Yeah. But
a cheap back that I don't really get. And I saw one of your conviction plays was Chase Edmonds. I actually had highlighted James Conner. He played, I believe it was at least 4 snaps, or I know it was at least 4 snaps that I remember inside the 5-yard line. Didn't get a carry on any of them because they were doing some other stuff. It would not be that surprising if James Conner had a 2-touchdown game. So that's when we talk about flipping the build. That's one way to do it. Like if you go up to a McCaffrey, Kamara, a Cook, and you go down to James Conner at 4,400 on DraftKings, it's a little bit more expensive still, depending on if you get all the way up to McCaffrey, than the Harris Carson combo or somebody in that range. At the same time, like there are still guys like at 4,400. James Conner played half the snaps last week, was playing inside the 10, didn't get a lot of touches down there. I do think he's going to have multi TD games this year. We're going to look back at week 8 and be talking about, oh, James Conner could have that game like he had back in week 3 or week 5 or whatever. Like, it's definitely in his profile. We're going to be talking about it later, but we're not talking about it now because we haven't seen it yet. And anyway, I think he's a cheap running back. It's like we're just not even talking about the fact that he had a pretty solid role in what should be a high scoring game. The offense looked great. And everything.
Yeah, I like this transition into these cheap backs because I'm very, very interested in multiple of them. Like you said, I have Chase Edmonds tagged as a conviction play, but I'd see the case for both. I like the Cardinals backfield in general. Like you said, I think Connor has that goal line TD equity, but Chase Edmonds absolutely has that pass game role on lock and just the floor that provides. I really like, and kind of my point earlier this week, I think it was on Overzet's stream. I basically said, like, I totally get the concerns of Chase Edmonds not having the goal line role, but it's not like he's not going to score a touchdown this year. You know what I mean? So maybe he doesn't have 3 touchdown games in his range of outcomes, but he's 4,900. Like, we're not talking about, if he was 6,500, like, of course, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. But like you said, in this game, I'm excited about, just betting against this idea that everybody's latched onto with the goal line thing. I think my main GPP team is Alvin Kamara and Chase Edmonds. So this idea, right, of let's get away from that 6 to 7K range and let's go to a stud and let's go to a cheaper guy. I really like that structure. And then he fits, right? You have Vikings on the opposite side. Like, if you wanted to play Dalvin with him too and use those guys, kind of like you said with CMC and Kamara, you can do that. Justin Jefferson, Thielen, whatever. There's a lot of fun options with that. The other guy, which is going to transition into partially one of my gross takes of the slate that I really like that's cheap, is Javonte Williams. And I know I was reading your Stealing Signals newsletter this morning, and you were giving me shit earlier in the week for not having read it already when we booked a bet that I'm going to lose. But I had the same takeaway from the Broncos game with Javonte Williams, was that he's in a split, but this is the first game for a young rookie back that, they've been kind of hinting at us that they feel comfortable with him and, pass blocking in all scenarios of the game, but sometimes that's just coach speak, right? The coaches in Washington have been telling us Antonio Gibson is CMC for 2 years, and we haven't seen him be CMC. So to see him get, a split role, play in all facets of the game, and now he went from a bad matchup to the Texans just ran for 7, that all the Texans running backs scored. They scored 1 million fantasy points and scored a ton of points on this, Urban Meyer clown show of a team. Like, Javonte at 4,400 is really exciting to me.
Yeah, I am totally comfortable with playing him. The reason I didn't land on him is because Melvin Gordon had a 70-yard TD right at the end of that game last week. And it's like, how coaches are. They're not we're not going to start to see more work shift to Javonte 1 week after that. We got to see some, Melvin not being explosive for a bit. He actually, I think, had the fastest time on the next gen stats, sprint speed. Maybe Melvin still has a little bit of juice. I don't know. I completely faded him in season long and everything, but the fact that he hits that late is a little concerning for me. But to your point, and Stealing Signals, I was talking this week about Javonte Williams starting out at a 50, a straight up 50-50 role is massive, because rookies tend to gain throughout the season. We saw this, Jonathan Taylor. We see it every year with rookies, right? That is big. That is very, very big to see that from week 1. He's going to have a good year. It could also, be very solid for week 2 as well. But I would have felt more comfortable with that bet if Gordon wouldn't have, just had this one sort of breakout play right at the end of last week.
Yeah, how coaches are, and Fangio is definitely one of the boomer coaches. I mean, that would definitely not surprise me. However, I think that there's enough to go around in this matchup, right? So the Broncos, well, I'll maybe save the actual gross hot take, but the Broncos are a team I'm really trying to target today in Javonte. I mean, if you wanted to tell me you want to play Melvin because of that, I'm not doing, that's not how I play, but I wouldn't even really say you're an idiot. You know what I mean? I think everyone on the Broncos is in play, and no one, it's kind of bizarre. I'm not saying Noah Fant is going to be a little bit popular and KJ Hamler isn't going to be, 2%, but on a week where there really isn't a lot of value, in maybe the best matchup in the NFL, right? The Texans just scored 1 million points on this team. We're going to get Jerry Jeudy out and all these targets available on an offense that looked pretty darn good last week. Like, they settled for a couple of field goals. They could have scored. They could have put up a pretty big number on a much better defense. And like, this isn't the screaming chalk. You know what I mean? Like, KJ, why is it? Tell me why KJ Hamler is not like.
Did you say he's not going to be 2%, or he is?
He's not going to be 2%, but he's not going to be. I don't know. I'm trying to pull him up right now.
On RotoGrinders, they have him projected at 0.8%. Which,
oh Jesus. Okay, well then he is. Then like, how do you not play KJ Hamler?
You have to play him. I mean, we're going to single-handedly raise his ownership, but like, he's phenomenal prospect profile. 75-yard touchdown in the preseason. Should have had about a 50-yard TD just last week. Created about 7 yards of separation. Was just running around. Could have done a whole lap around the end zone before he was waiting for that throw to come down from Teddy Bridgewater. Still should have caught it. But that was his only incompleted target last week. He still had, I believe it was, I don't know that for certain actually, but that's how I remember his stat line was 3 catches, 4 targets, I think. And the other ones were all him running wide open on like deep out patterns. This dude is like Deshaun Jackson 2.0. He's extremely, extremely good. Not well suited to Teddy Bridgewater, but he's going to run more routes. Yeah, 3 catches, 41 yards on 4 targets last week. Going to run more routes, obviously, with Jerry Jeudy out. They said right away early in the week, our starting 3 receivers are Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, and KJ Hamler. Like, they made that very clear. He was a second-round pick last year. The reason no one talks about him as positively as maybe they should is because Jeudy was a first-round pick in the same class. But you're talking about a second-round pick. He has the draft capital, has the prospect profile. This guy is actually really good and has been completely just overlooked, kind of overshadowed by Jeudy coming to the same team from the same draft class as a higher draft pick. Hamler is very, very good. I love it. I probably have too much of him this week.
Yeah, me too. And there's a $4,000 milli maker this week, and hopefully KJ Hamler is taking. I may not be here next week if KJ Hamler takes me to the. I may still be partying if KJ Hamler takes me to the. But it's just fascinating to me. I think that there's these rare scenarios where I see a guy, and I'm just like that's obvious. Like, he should be kind of the chalk, and then they aren't. And I'm like, am I missing something? And it seems almost too easy to me. So now, again, I'm gonna, mush Hamler into a so-so score. But even like, if he does what he did last week, right, at 3,800 on DraftKings, yes, you're probably not winning. I'm not going to win $1 million with that. But like, you're not dead. You're not dead. What's that with his floor, basically? And so it's all upside, like you said. And the fit with Teddy is kind of fascinating to me because I talked to Evan Silva. We did a stream in the off season, and it was after Teddy got named starter, and how he put it actually was like bullish on KJ Hamler, because he said, I just want dudes who get open, because Teddy doesn't throw people open. I know he doesn't throw downfield a lot, but that's partially because he doesn't throw people open, and you kind of got to, lead a guy or whatever. But Hamler just gets open. He runs a 4.2 40. Like you said, he's a freak. So anyway, not to keep belaboring, KJ Hamler, but I think he's really interesting. And if you are a little,
sorry, kickoff. But part of the reason is probably like I have him in 25% of my lineups. I'm just looking right now, and that's somewhat lower than I wanted actually, because I'm having you have a hard time correlating him. He's sort of like a one-off. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do have like a Bridgewater lineup, right? So I went and played the game. You can correlate him with Chenault and stuff, but the Jaguars look so bad that that's an interesting discussion. How are you bringing that back with Jacksonville?
All right, this is where we're getting into the grossness. Okay. Our friend Pat Carrain has been touting James O'Shaughnessy all week. And if you want the Tyler Croft of this week, it's James O'Shaughnessy at 2,700.
Can't get away from James O'Shaughnessy. I do a lot of chatting with Pat throughout the week. Some content with him over ship chasing. I've been giving him crap about this call. Hey, now you're hitting me with it on Sunday. Beautiful.
It makes sense, right? If the Broncos are going to score a ton, like, I'm not excited about James O'Shaughnessy. Let's just make that very, very clear. But I played a ton of Tyler Kroft last week, and I've played I've played Chris Herndon in my life. I've played far worse tight ends. And my expectation, this is what I truly believe, to be serious for a second, the Broncos are going to like name their score. I think the Broncos offense is like legitimately good. I think Teddy is a good thing for unlocking. People think he like caps them. I think he unlocks this offense just because he can get the ball to these guys. Yes, he's not going to be, Mahomesing 70-yard touchdowns or whatever, but just get Cortland Sutton is good. KJ Hamler is good. Tim Patrick is good. Noah Fant is good. Like, just get the ball to these guys in like the best matchup of the day. And then obviously I as much as I want to love Visca, I'd be lying if I wasn't a little bit concerned about his true ceiling in tougher matchups. I think that the floor is absolutely there on Visca, but you get this tight end thing, right? If I'm expecting basically the game flow to go like it went last week for Houston, you're going to get O'Shaughnessy out there a ton. They're going to throw 50 times again. And if you luck box a touchdown at 2,700, like he could be your GPP winner. I know it's gross, but like that's another way to, how you get CMC and Kamara or, Dalvin or DeAndre Hopkins or whatever. You play KJ Hamler and James O'Shaughnessy.
I'm making a lineup right now with KJ Hamler and James O'Shaughnessy and McCaffrey and Kamara.
We're gonna have us and like a couple of sick puppies listening that are actually gonna take this advice, or they're gonna be the only people with these KJ Hamler, James O'Shaughnessy lineups. But I do think the point really isn't even necessarily like, KJ Hamler I think is a smash, but those guys are going under owned on this slate, which in turn makes Kamara and CMC and Dalvin under owned. And even like DeAndre Hopkins is not going to be that popular because, that's what spot that people aren't chasing, right? He looked awesome, had 2 touchdowns last week, but people aren't going to chase because we have the Cowboys game and such. Even like, Cooper Kupp is 6K, which is silly. We have this mid tier of guys, so people aren't chasing that. And that's the construction I'm looking for.
We have a note that Bridgewater asked the equipment staff to move Hamler's locker next to his. I missed that.
Yeah,
that is a big note for this week. I need to make a few more KJ Hamler lineups.
Oh yeah.
No, one of the other guys that I'm playing a little bit is Marcus Callaway. Everyone loved last week, not playing this week.
Great call.
Kind of the same thing as Kyle Pitts. I didn't play either a lot of Kyle Pitts or Marcus Callaway last week.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I played Callaway at all. I only played in tournaments. But this week, his situation like almost literally has not changed. Like I guess it's not really a much worse matchup. He was facing Jair Alexander last week. Like the Panthers might have some pretty good corners. I was going to say it's a tougher matchup. It's not a tougher matchup. The Panthers, it's probably an easier matchup, but the Panthers might actually have some pretty good corners. Anyway, I'm comfortable with playing Callaway for sure, going back to him this week, but he's one guy that I was looking at, like I might have to come off of to get more Hamler in my life because he's a little bit more expensive than Hamler. Then I can pay up at defense in one of these lineups. That might be what I'll do there.
I'm going to try to get, a pay up defense with some of these god awful scrubs we keep mentioning, but Callaway is like has to be like the synopsis of this overreaction or underreaction thing, right? We had the Marquez Callaway roller coaster. We need to like write a short film about this, right? That Michael Thomas gets hurt. He's getting hype even before Michael Thomas gets hurt. Then he looks like the second coming of Terrell Owens in the preseason. Everybody's getting all this hype. He gets steamed way up during draft season, and we're all excited for him in week 1. He's the highest owned wide receiver on the slate, despite a matchup with arguably the best cover corner in the NFL. He obviously duds, which we don't even know if that had anything to do with him or the matchup or whatever. The game he had no shot. Like he had no chance to do anything. Now at not that much more, like he's still a cheap wide receiver. Yeah. Like he's unknown. He's completely unknown.
You made the point. Right? They only threw 20 passes last week. Like that's all you really need to know. I don't think there's nothing in his routes or anything that suggested he was the clear number 1 wide receiver in routes. He just had a low target share because of a very low target volume game where there's some variance in that, right? This week they throw 25 plus passes, as we should probably expect every team to most weeks. They throw 30 plus passes. I expect him to get 20% of the targets, and get a lot more than what people are expecting. So in terms of the fact that he's still just as cheap and no one wants to play him. It just doesn't there's so many situations like this that don't make sense to me.
I also think to get another quick plug in, some of these types of guys, the sharper people, I'm not saying that I'm sharper, but the sharper people are kind of aware of KJ Hamler, are aware of the game theory aspect, the bounce back aspect to Marquez Callaway. But if you go to Yahoo, no hatred on Yahoo or anybody that likes to play on Yahoo, I found it to be a little bit kind of softer, and the pricing is a little bit different, right? It's in like single dollars. It's not in thousands. And I just found the pricing to be a little bit softer, but that makes these guys even less owned on Yahoo. Like we're talking about nobody playing KJ Hamler on DraftKings. People are still going to play KJ Hamler on DraftKings because that's like the sharpest site that's out there, right? You go to Yahoo, you plug in promo code Grinders25. How about that for a plug? You plug in promo code Grinders25 and you get a free $25. Put it on KJ Hamler, watch him catch the 70-yard touchdown that nobody thinks can happen with Teddy Bridgewater, and print, because he really is going to be 0.5% on Yahoo. And Marquez Callaway, same thing. Nobody's playing Marquez Callaway on Yahoo. So those kinds of guys I think are even more fascinating kind of on some ancillary sites. So we got a what I don't even know what time we're supposed to wrap up. Devin, 7 minutes. Okay, thank you, Devin. So we'll get into the last few minutes with some questions. Dogs are also letting me know that it's about time to wrap up. I'm gonna lead in with my like kind of hot take before we get to some questions though, and it has to do with KJ Hamler. Spoiler, but I think that the Broncos are the team that I just can't make. It doesn't make any sense to me that no one is playing any of these Broncos. And like I said earlier, I have my preference, right? I like Javonte. I like Hamler. I mean, Fant looks like an absolute smash to me at tight end. I know he's reasonably popular. I mean, even if you wanted to tell yourself Cortland Sutton, like Brandon Cooks just destroyed this team. Mark Ingram just destroyed this Jaguars team. And like, nobody's really on the Broncos. I guess it's because Teddy's not sexy. I'm going to play a Teddy. I'm going to play a Teddy Bridgewater lineup. I think you need to have a Bronco in your lineup is basically my kind of hot take for this slate. I don't know. I don't honestly know who it is. It could be Melvin Gordon. It could be Tim Patrick. It could be Alberto. Maybe Alberto's. You don't want to play James O'Shaughnessy, play Alberto at tight end. But I think the Broncos are just set up to be an absolute smash. And like they're all, besides I guess kind of Fant, they're all completely unknown in tournaments. So there's my kind of hot take before we get into some questions.
Yeah, I mean,
now I'm putting you on the spot after you answer that.
Well, my quick response to that too would be that the Jags at 2,300 are another cheap defense. No one's going to play because their D looks so bad. If you're not playing a Bronco, like Beimfohr just said, then you probably should be playing the Jags D, who are going to be a really low-owned, cheap defense option. You're basically saying that, obviously, because the prices on these Denver players are good enough that I'm with you. You should probably be playing a Denver player. But if you don't have a skill player or the Jags defense, you're probably doing something wrong somewhere. I mean, that's sort of, I don't know. I probably have lineups that are also doing that same thing wrong. But you're going to put me on the spot.
I'm putting you. That's my take is that basically if you make a tournament lineup, it needs to have a Bronco in it. And I even somebody was giving me shit in a private chat earlier today about I said you should even play Teddy. Maybe if you're only playing one team, you don't feel comfortable playing Teddy. But I think if you're playing multiple teams or MMEing, I actually think Teddy at his price makes a lot of sense, particularly on DraftKings. I think he has passed to 303 or whatever, and coming close enough to those. He runs a little bit too. People don't give him enough credit for his legs, and so I actually do like Teddy.
Teddy, Hamler, Fant, Chanel.
Oh yeah,
that are.
Oh yeah, those are fun. You want to talk about jamming some studs and having like no ownership on your entire team? Those are fun builds.
My take will be that McCaffrey is going to be in the winning lineup. I mean, on everything that he's going to smash. And we're all going to be like, oh, what was no one doing playing Christian McCaffrey? He's going to, he's going to find the end zone and score 35 plus points. And that's going to be enough where like the optimal build will have McCaffrey in it. That'll be my take.
I love that.
It's not exactly hot, but like, why is he under 12%? I just don't understand.
It is pretty crazy. Like, I feel like we've like made this evolution throughout the course of the show of all these things that like, as you stumble across them, you're like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Marquez Callaway was 30% last week. He's in a better spot unowned this week. Christian McCaffrey, chalk last week. Yes, the spot is worse, but like you could probably run back your team from last week, right? Elijah Moore was chalk last week. I get the matchup is not very good.
Crowder's out. You can play.
I was
Elijah
just going to say, yep. Crowder and Mims is inactive, I believe. Yep. I saw as well. So like Keelan Cole is in, but like I don't care about Keelan Cole for Elijah Moore. You could like run back your team from last week, probably, right? Like Jalen Hurts,
and it'll be low owned. It'll probably win.
Exactly. Like you'll win tournaments with like Jalen Hurts was the chalk cash game quarterback. Play CMC and play Kamara and Callaway and Elijah Moore, whatever, run back that team. And like it's actually a really good tournament team. So like I'm not obviously saying to do that, but like that premise is like a good guiding light for making your finalizing your teams here. All right, let's pull up some questions. David Montgomery or Chris Carson or both? Can I say neither?
Yeah, I'm kind of on team neither there. I did play Montgomery in one build where I wanted to play a Burrow stack because I went out and did a Burrow, double stack and did Montgomery. I think you have to play Montgomery if you're doing that, which I don't ever play David Montgomery, but that was my bring back to my Burrow stack.
Like I will say, God, I can't.
But I think Carson's chalk. Like people are playing Carson, but
Carson is chalky. I would be smart about how I play Carson. I would like an AJ Brown or a Julio Jones or something on the other side of Carson, as opposed to just kind of a one-off Carson, which I think is what most people will do. David Montgomery is not a guy that I really typically like to play. I'm also very, very concerned about Damian Williams stealing, this pass game role, which is really what catapulted Montgomery to a smash. However, he's low owned also. So
last year, 8 of 11 games after Tariq Cohen got hurt, Montgomery played over 80% of the snaps and never played fewer than 60%. He played 59% in week 1. So completely different in week 1 from what we saw. And someone mentioned to me that maybe he left that Sunday night game for a little bit. I didn't see a big injury for him, but still, like we saw a lot of Damian Williams last week. I'm concerned about that.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, if you're not playing Kamara CMC, why not? Or if you're playing Kamara and CMC, why? I agree. Just punt off tight end with and I brought up O'Shaughnessy. I legitimately believe like Alberto got in there a fair bit. I think there's reasons to believe they could play more 2 tight end sets without Jerry Jeudy. There are cheap tight ends. Everybody's going to play the Higbee, probably Fant. Going to play that Jared Cook, that 4K ish range. And like they're not that much better than these cheaper guys. So
they're really not.
Like
CJ Uzama is the tight end in my Burrow stack. I mean, they went very 11 personnel heavy, and Uzama ran a ton of routes. It was not dissimilar to what happened with Higbee and the Rams. Zach Taylor comes from the Ram coaching tree. I like these offenses that are highly concentrated in their routes. Uzama was like the clear Bengals tight end in week 1. And again, the Bengals didn't throw a ton, but if they throw more, Uzama's going to have some games. It's the Dalton Schultz play from last year. The Cowboys were like this. He was running every route from the tight end spot. Yes, they have great receivers, but Dalton Schultz had good weeks last year. He was in some big DFS lineups and some stacks. So Uzama's
Julie asked is Jeff Swaim or McCole Pruitt viable with Ferkser looking unlikely? Is Ferkser hurt that I missed?
I think he's out.
Is Ferkser out? Okay. I'm again also not super excited about Jeff Swaim and McCole Pruitt, but there's another cheap tight end if you want to punt off and hope for a touchdown. Troutman. Somebody mentioned Troutman. So anyway, you guys are nailing all these. Just if whoever your favorite guy down there is. All right, we're about up against it here, but I will hit a couple of these questions really quick. DK Cash, favorite wide receiver, 5.1K or cheaper. Jamar Chase, which is kind of crazy that he's cheaper than that.
DK. Oh yeah, I'm not making a cash lineup. I'll let you hit that.
Yeah, I was going to hit it because I didn't want to put the cash game questions onto you. Amari, again, cash. Amari and Eagles D or Cup and Steelers D. For me, it's Amari. I'm just going to side with that game in cash. I really like, Cooper Kupp is also a good cash play at 6K, but in cash, I would side with that game. I think that is about it. We talked about the Bucs a little bit. The last question is, do you prefer Tom Brady or Josh Allen in tournaments?
Obviously I lean towards Allen because of the rushing potential, and yet I do have a Brady lineup, and I don't know that I ever built an Allen lineup. So he's pricier. It's more challenging. I definitely think he could play Brady. I like the idea of playing this Bucks team to just be basically last year's Bills and continuing to just throw a ton.
Yep. When all the weapons, that's how I feel about Teddy, right? I would be a hypocrite if I said I like all the Broncos. So in turn, I like Teddy. I like all the Bucks today, and I like the Falcons bringbacks. And that game stack is going to be completely unknown. So makes sense to me. I think it's to wrap up. Obviously, we talked about ways to leverage the market, overreacting or underreacting. We talked about how you can kind of change the roster construction, right? I think those are the big things. And there's games, right? Everybody's fascinated by the Cowboys Chargers game, but there's Bucks Falcons, Seahawks Titans, right? We talked about the Broncos. There's 49ers Eagles. There's all these other games. So, kind of whatever your gut preference is, there's so many different ways to be unique. So I would just keep that in mind as you're finalizing your teams. It's really, really, it's really not difficult to play really good plays and be contrarian this week. So we're a couple minutes over. The Crunch Time crew is going to come in. Thank you guys a ton for joining us. It was a blast. I always love talking to Ben, and for me, and for producer Devin, and of course for Ben, and for KJ Hamler and all you other sickos that are going to win a bunch of money with us when he catches a bomb touchdown. We will see you guys in week 3.
Here back at the Fantasy Bar, 6 plays for you fresh off the tap on Yahoo for week 2, including some chalk from last week that busted that we want to go back to. A big time stack I'm looking at here in week 2. A guy that I think is too cheap at the running back position. And of course, my favorite play of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 2 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack talking Yahoo 6 guys for you here for their big contests over there, including the $1 million baller contest. The best news, guys, it's only a $10 entry and 0 rake on this tournament. You're just not going to find that anywhere outside of Yahoo. So make sure you guys take advantage. We're going to give you some plays to utilize in that tournament. Also, now have single game offerings over on Yahoo. So Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday Night Football, all those one gamers, they are offering contests there as well. Have the Yahoo Cup going on, absolutely free to play, $150,000 in total prizes there. So a ton of good stuff going on over at Yahoo. Guys, make sure you go and check it out. And especially that baller contest, make sure you guys get in that, some potential overlay in that one as well. And how do you beat no rake? You absolutely can't. Yahoo doing it big here in week 2. Now, as far as housekeeping for us goes, make sure you click that thumbs up button. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also do a Fanduel and Draftkings video each and every week. So check that out. It's basically 12 guys I like across the industry, but we're going to highlight some Yahoo prices I like here in today's video. Let's get to it now. Actually, one more thing. Don't forget scoresandodds.com/beer for all of your sports betting needs. Tons of nuggets in there, tons of numbers and analytics. Guys, you're going to just love what you see there. Every single game broken down, premium picks as well, and the ability to compare odds across all the different sports books. Go and check it out. Link in the description of the video, scoresandodds.com/beer. All right, let's get things started here. We're talking chalk that busted last week that we want to go back to, and that's at the tight end position. We're rolling with Kyle Pitts, just $18. Now, tight end kind of ugly here this week. We don't have Travis Kelce on this slate here. We have Darren Waller in the high end in a tough matchup, coming off 1,000 targets here. But the guy I really like here is Kyle Pitts. We know he's very popular last week. A lot of people excited about Kyle Pitts coming out of the draft and out of preseason, but really let a lot of people down. Well, guess what? That's going to lead to a lot of people not wanting to go back to the well here in Kyle Pitts. Yo, you got to show me something before we're going to roster you. I say nonsense on that. We look at this matchup here. Atlanta, huge underdogs here in this game. We know Tampa Bay is going to put up points. What's that going to do? It's going to force Atlanta to throw the ball, and their target tree pretty thin here. We know the ball's going to go to Calvin Ridley. We know it's going to go to Kyle Pitts. So I like him as a one-off play. Really like him attached to any of your Tampa Bay stacks that you're going to throw out here this week. Tampa also a pass funnel. What does that mean? They are the best team in the league against the run. They are vulnerable against the pass and tight ends. Bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to this position. So I think this is the breakout spot for Kyle Pitts. I think Matt Ryan's going to have to throw the ball a ton here. Take advantage, under $20 on Kyle Pitts. Let's stay at that same $18 price here at running back. We're rolling with Chase Edmonds of the Cardinals. Now, probably not the $18 running back that you were expecting here. Darrell Henderson at that same price point at Indianapolis. Looks like he may be the most popular running back here on Yahoo. Now, I don't have a problem with Henderson in your cash games. With tournaments, I like the pivot here to Chase Edmonds. Cardinals, nice home favorites here. We know it's a great spot for our running backs. Nice projected team total at 27.5 here as well. And I know James Conner going to mix in here as well, but it was Edmonds who dominated the pass game usage here and dominated the carries as well. Vikings, you look at last week, Joe Mixon, massive game against this team, and they were bottom 5 against the running back position in 2020. Arizona in a good spot here. Chase Edmonds, way too cheap at just $18. All right, speaking of cheap, we're going to give you a minimum price play. That's right, all the way down to $10 at wide receiver with Cedric Wilson of the Cowboys. Now, a lot of people don't want to play a third receiver. I understand that. But when it's an offense like the Dallas Cowboys, it's something that we can take advantage of. Tons of targets, tons of opportunity to go around here. And Wilson's looked good in the limited opportunities he's got. Well, now he's going to step in to the very valuable role. Michael Gallup placed on IR. Cooper and Lamb can't get all the targets here. So Wilson, very, very intriguing here at just $10. We look back to week 1. Dak Prescott, 58 pass attempts. We have another massive total here in this game at 55, and the Cowboys underdogs in this game. So if it goes to script, I think we're going to see a lot of passing attempts here for Dallas, even in a competitive game, and Dallas wins. I think they're going to do it on the arm of Dak Prescott. So again, yes, Lamb, Cooper, fantastic options, but Wilson at just $10. We look back again to week 1. Michael Gallup, 7 targets before he left that game. Wilson comes in and gets 3 targets. So let's add them together. Hypothetically, we're talking 10 targets. We're talking $1 per target here. Now, I'm expecting 10 targets for Cedric Wilson. I think he realistically gets 7 or 8 in this game. So we're close. We're in the wheelhouse. Point is, he's cheap in a big-time offense, a salary saver here with Cedric Wilson of the Cowboys. So we like Cedric Wilson. That means naturally we're going to pair him up here with our quarterback play for week 2, Dak Prescott. So Dak's sitting at $37, a little bit cheaper than a Brady. Some of the other guys on the high end. Looks like ownership going to be pretty minimal here as well. And we talked about the big total in this game, the potential shootout here. And yes, the Chargers, pretty good defense here. Get Darwin James back, no doubt. That is a help. But they did struggle with quarterbacks last season. 11th most fantasy points allowed to this position. Again, Dallas, big-time underdog. LA projected for almost 30 points. I think this game shoots out and actually goes over that total if you're betting games here. But Dak showed us the huge upside that he has, barely running the ball at all. I think you're going to start to see a little bit more of that as he feels more comfortable here. Main point is upside to be the highest scoring quarterback on this slate. Price does not reflect that, and ownership does not either. Love all the combination of all these factors. Dak Prescott, my favorite quarterback here in week 2 on Yahoo. All right, let's move back to the wide receiver position. Guess what? We're not done with Dallas. That's right. We're going to double stack here with CeeDee Lamb, $23. Now, maybe a little bit of Dallas overkill for some of you guys, but the double stack, very underutilized in GPPs across the industry. So we're going to roll it out here. You can very well mix in Amari Cooper here as well, do a bunch of different lineups, but Wilson helps save you some money in the stack. And Lamb, just a little bit too cheap here. We'll talk about that here in a second. But let's talk about the usage in week 1. 15 targets in that one. And I don't think that changes here in this matchup. We just talked about how high I am on Dak Prescott here and this offense. I think CeeDee Lamb obviously going to be a big part of the weekly game plan, week in, week out. And I mentioned the price, $23, 17th highest priced wide receiver on Yahoo.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Crunch Time, 12:30 Eastern here. Thanks for sticking with us all morning, or if you're just rolling out of bed or rolling in, welcome. We're going to catch you up to date, and we're going to give you some takes on what we're doing, what the right quote unquote right plays are, and maybe where some leverage is here. I'm Justin Carlucci, aka the Luch, and I'm here with Mr. Tuttle and Creighton. What's going on, Mr. Gaspar? How are you?
Doing all right. Struggling a little bit to figure out the last pieces of my main tournament lineup, but other than that, it's a pretty fun slate. So excited for it.
Kristi, we don't have any Raheem Mostert-esque news this week, which is a great thing. So how are you doing? How are your builds coming? And how was your week?
Yeah, good. Week was good. Excited to be back here with you guys. And yeah, glad we don't have any late news to process, and kind of like Tuttle, just kind of putting the finishing touches on the main lineups here. So excited to break it down with all of you.
Absolutely. A couple of quick plugs here and mentions. BetMGM, get on over there and put in promo code GRINDERSBET. Bet $10 and get up to $200 instantly. Yahoo over there. I mean, a lot of great promos early in the season here. Promo code Grinders25 with a capital G. That's Grinders25 on Yahoo for a free $25 bonus on your first deposit. And of course, RG Premium. If you like what we do, and if you don't, I mean, I don't know, we're good at what we do. We got great ownership projections, so many articles, podcast videos for every show, showdown stuff. I mean, our showdown content is awesome. Slate IQs, and of course we have the shows before kickoff and the premium roundtable type stuff with Squirrel Patrol and those guys. So check out RG Premium. You could really customize what you subscribe for. If you don't play every sport, you're not into everything, you could kind of mix and match or take a selective package there. So I, for one, would be lost without ownership projections, and I love what we have here at RG, and we'll talk about some ownerships throughout the show and get your questions in the chat there on YouTube. Also give us a like and subscribe. We appreciate it as well, and we'll get to your questions in the second half of this show here before kickoff. So we got about a half an hour before kickoff, and Tuttle, you're the first one on my screen this week on the good old Zoom here. So I'll just start kicking it off with you first here. Let's go around the horn. Talk to me about these quarterbacks, cash and GPPs, however you want to take it here.
So cash games, I think you're probably going to have a fairly concentrated pool on Draftkings specifically. I think the big question and big toss-up people are dealing with is Justin Herbert or Dak Prescott. It's a coin flip, 100%. It's a coin flip. I would not be surprised if it ends up either way in terms of who the highest scoring is. I do give personally a slight lean to Herbert, just because when I think about it in my head, and this is a terrible way to think about it, it's non-sophisticated at all, but it's like Dallas defense versus Chargers defense. If one shows up, who is more likely? And it's Chargers defense. Dallas defense is just so bad. I think, and we have it this way, I think Dak will end up being a little bit higher owned, just because I think his receivers overall will be higher owned with CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. But in cash games, you don't have to worry about that. Herbert's the guy for me. And surprisingly, the $100 does matter this week in savings, because it depends on how you view like a Tyler Higbee versus Noah Fant type equation. I think that's going to be discussed later at the tight end position. But so the $100 does matter this week. So I think that's where it ends in terms of cash games on DraftKings. In tournaments, lots of different options you can go with. One of the more crazy slates in terms of high scoring expected. So we got Kyler Murray, we got even Tom Brady in the late games. Russell Wilson's going to go overlooked in those late games. And then one guy I'll throw out two more guys here real quick. One guy I know I'm not taking away from Kristi from saying, because I've touted this guy all week. It's a terrible take. Tripling down on it though, I will put out the disclaimer that this is completely unnecessary. You do not need to play this guy, but I do have some Mac Jones shares this week. I'm of the opinion the matchup's actually very, very good for him in terms of personnel standpoint. Jets secondary is a lot worse than what they can bring on the defensive front in terms of run game. We saw last week the Patriots fumble away the game. They had 2 fumbles. Ramondre Stevenson is not active this week because of that. Bill Belichick is one of the few coaches that does actually game plan according to his opponent. And I think you'll see Mac actually drop back and throw a decent amount in this spot. So again, it's not really necessary. I don't think he has like a 40-point ceiling, but I could see 25 points out of him, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, I think is certainly within the realm.
Yeah, good points. And I have a good amount of Damian Harris, so I'm not hoping you're entirely wrong. Just let me get 1 touchdown out of Harris, and and we'll call it even.
Just be passing touchdowns. Cool with me.
Yeah, Damian Harris out of the backfield. Sure, it's fine, right? Yeah, I mean, good stuff. And I think we're gonna find a lot about how good really is Tampa Bay's offense, right? Like how bad really is Dallas's defense. Of course, they played each other in week 1. So I think we're going to find out a lot more and maybe put some of that to rest here after week 2. Quarterbacks, Kristi, we talked about maybe someone you're interested in paying up for in maybe a game that might be going overlooked.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree with Tuttle's cash take too. You know, it kind of comes down to Herbert or Prescott, but a guy that I think is going to get overlooked is Kyler Murray a little bit. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him be the highest, QB scoring quarterback on the slate once again. He's just in a great position. I think that game in general is overlooked. I know you and I were talking beforehand. Like that part of the game, DeAndre Hopkins, I think, no one's going to pay up for him. So I like that combination. So I think he's an interesting tournament play. You guys mentioned Tom Brady. I think he's a great play and a great pivot from some of the chalkier plays in Herbert and Prescott. So like him a tad. Russell Wilson for GPPs, and then Jalen Hurts too. I think that game aligns well going up against San Francisco. He put up a ton of points last week. We have projected ownership right now at 6.5%. So I think that's certainly an interesting play. And then just the last one I would say is Joe Burrow. I think he's got just a ton of weapons. I like Jamar Chase a ton as a value, especially on FanDuel when we get to the receivers. But I think he's an interesting GPP play as well.
I can't disagree with any of anyone's calls here. There's a lot of different directions you can go. Mm-hmm. I mentioned Russell Wilson last week, and I'm going to mention him again. Coming in at a fairly low ownership too. I am a Titans fan. I will say that. I don't know about the defense, guys. I don't know. I was optimistic coming into the season. Obviously, Tennessee's offense really had nowhere to go last week, giving up 5 sacks to Chandler Jones alone. Thanks, Taylor Lewan. Appreciate it. But that totally flipped the game on its head. So even if the Titans are a shell of what they were, last season, I think that is another sneaky game. AJ Brown's coming in at sub 10% ownership. He scored last week. I mean, they were atrocious, a train wreck, and he still was okay in most formats. So I'm not screaming go out there and play Ryan Tannehill, but I think AJ Brown and dare I say maybe Julio Jones will come in at next to no ownership. And that Seattle secondary is no good, as good as the front seven is. So I don't know, just another contrarian take there. So let's move on to the running backs here. And obviously you have Mr. Christian McCaffrey all the way up top on DK, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb gaining some late steam here with the Browns and that very high Vegas total that a lot of people seem to be sleeping on or just stacking that Dallas LA game. And then it seems like a lot of people are going to be living in that 6K range here. Just looking at the most recent ownership projections, we have Chris Carson coming in north of 25% on FanDuel. And I know he was around that 20% mark on DK and at a little bit cheaper of a price tag here. So I feel like at least on DK, we're going to see, people living in that mid-range RB area and, maybe a little bit of Chubb and a Kamara, but I don't know, who's going to pay all the way up for McCaffrey. So I've been gaining more interest for McCaffrey in larger field tournaments as the morning has kind of moved along here. So Tuttle, I'll throw it over to you first. What's going on at running back today for you, in your opinion?
Yeah, it is a pretty interesting slate in terms of running back, because I do think we'll see concentrated ownership, like our projections suggest, upon some guys that are like good plays theoretically, but we haven't seen it yet. Like from Najee Harris, theory behind him is he played 100% of the snaps last week, right? He's going to get the touches. They're home favorite. I do like Najee Harris. I'm probably playing him in my main lineup. But at the same time, it's not crazy to think he doesn't get there, just like he didn't get there last week, despite getting almost 20 touches. So I do think you just play Najee Harris in cash, though. It's kind of a similar story with Chris Carson, who I got to actually get him out. I have him excluded in this current version of Lineup HQ because I was running some builds with DK Metcalf locked in. I didn't want both those guys. Chris Carson, kind of same story. Rashad Penny went down last week, saw extended workload with that. Good matchup. I'm more likely to fade Chris Carson, as you can see. I excluded him in my builds. I'm more likely to fade Chris Carson than I am Najee Harris. I just think Harris is the better overall option. And I just like the passing attack from Seattle quite a bit more. In terms of tournaments, you kind of hit it on the head. I think a lot of these high-priced options are going to go completely overlooked. It's crazy to think that Christian McCaffrey is going to come in at like 11%, but that's what we have him projected at, and I think it's pretty accurate. Kind of same story for Alvin Kamara, who should continue to see increased rush share. Excellent play as well. And then if we look at low end, I know before the show started, you mentioned Chase Edmonds. He's a guy I like quite a bit. When you're just trying to find exposure to that Minnesota-Arizona game, he just fits so well. And he is my favorite low-priced option at running back. The other low-priced guy I think you can kind of consider is Javonte Williams. He's 4,400 on DraftKings. I mean, Jaguars defense just no good at all. They've allowed, I think it's 24 points in 16 straight games. The offense is going to score. It's just going to be, who threw is the question mark. He could total 20 touches in this spot, which is kind of crazy considering he's in a pretty much equal timeshare. But I think Javonte Williams is a decent low-priced option too.
Yeah, interesting stuff there. And, Chase Edmonds, I was looking for a cheap way to get a piece of that game. I told you before the show, he might be my Achilles heel if things go south. But, I liked his involvement last week against Tennessee, and that game script was so lopsided because of the early kind of big lead that James Conner was in there quite a bit. And I don't think he received a single target Connor did. So it seems like Connor is going to be the one-dimensional guy. I know, going off of 1 week of data, what the hell do I know? But based off of week one, it looks like, I'm assuming Edmonds in a neutral game script might be more of a thing and the way to go there. And I have a couple of Jefferson and Thielen shares for GPP. I'm playing some 3 max stuff, and Edmonds was just the guy who fit because I needed that like $6,500 to $7,500 for a receiver to pair with one of my quarterbacks. So I don't know. Maybe I'm too one-track minded right now, but in a lot of my correlations, it was Edmonds, and I wish it was Hopkins. I wish I could get Hopkins. We'll get there, though. But Kristi, talk to me about some running backs today.
Yeah, I like the guys that you mentioned for sure. I agree. I think some of those higher priced running backs are going to get overlooked. So I found myself getting McCaffrey in a lot and even correlating McCaffrey with the Panthers defense, but I like him a ton. I also have, and I don't think we've mentioned him yet, but Derrick Henry in particular on Fanduel, depending on how that game script goes, but he's still Derrick Henry. He's down to 8K on Fanduel. And I'm just thinking, he's a guy that could easily bust off for 3 touchdowns. I love the over in that game. And so I definitely have more exposure than the field on him. Henderson for the Rams. I think there'll be a lot of, concentration on Cooper Kupp and some of the receivers there. So I like him a bit. Delvin Cook, again, back to that game. I think, if we can get him at a little bit lower ownership than we usually do, I like that quite a bit. Ezekiel Elliott, it'll be interesting to see where things kind of come in there, but especially on DraftKings, his price is just really too good. We like that game in general. And so I definitely have more exposure over there on DraftKings. And then maybe just a couple other tournament guys. Miles Sanders seems to be getting overlooked too. I like his price in that Philadelphia game there. I think right now, just looking at the FanDuel side of it, if I'm reading it correct, we're just at like 3.5% ownership. So I like him, and he makes a lot of things work. So those are some of the guys that I'm mixing in.
That Philly 49ers game, I'm having another game where we'll kind of find out more about 2 teams, right? Again, maybe how bad Atlanta is. Philly, Jalen Hurts had a pretty good game week 1. The Niners were just, I don't understand with that Detroit second half. I don't know. Was that second half an anomaly, or are the Niners just not as good as the public thinks they are? I don't know. Of course, we had the Elijah Mitchell thing, and Trey Sermon's apparently going to get some time here. So let's play like a little fact or fiction here. Trey Sermon, will he be involved? Like, will he even play a snap? How many snaps does he play? And then you have Bruce Arians saying Ronald Jones is going to start. And if you're going to give me a 4,800 running back that's going to start in the Atlanta-Tampa Bay game, I don't love it because I think Arians is talking out of both sides of his mouth there. But I have so much Tom Brady that I had to run a little bit of a Ronald Jones hedge there too. So Tuttle, like, what do you think about this Elijah Mitchell situation? Are you like, in his ownership projections, is that about where you thought it would be? Or are you surprised it is where it is?
I would not be surprised to see if Mitchell came in a little bit higher on than what we have projected at, just based on last week's game logs. You got the game logs. So it's hard because we get in our little DFS bubbles. It's hard to predict what, the general public's going to do and what those game log surfers are going to do. I think he's like, I'm not playing him. Anytime you see Ian Rappaport make a report on workload, just go the other way. I believe Rappaport's report this week or overnight last night was that Eli Mitchell's the guy and going to carry the heavy workload. I don't believe that one bit. That's really never been their approach either with San Francisco. So I think like I'm not playing Eli Mitchell personally. And kind of same thing with Ronald Jones. You mentioned it. We even got a quote though later in the week from Arians that says, yeah, all three guys are starters because they're all good, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think you can trust either of these guys personally.
Kristi, you got any thoughts on either of those backfield situations?
I think the same thing. I mean, I'm staying away from the San Francisco backfield. I have just a small amount of Ronald Jones, like you mentioned, just, on the off chance that he does, but it's really hard to trust. But yeah, definitely kind of avoiding that San Francisco backfield too.
Yeah, before we move on, I do really like Nick Chubb in that really high total, and it should be a positive script to run the ball more than they already do. So I like Chubb a lot in all formats. One guy who I guess I'm more just going to take a wait and see, but I kind of like it for large field stuff is Jonathan Taylor. Was super involved, had some targets last week. I know Rams, Aaron Donald, we're going to get to see Quentin Nelson against Aaron Donald, which is just a microcosm of the whole matchup, but it's still pretty cool. But last week, David Montgomery and the Bears ran the ball pretty effectively on the Rams, and I was really surprised by that because I played a lot of Showdown, and I didn't have any David Montgomery. That was one of the stands I took. Montgomery also very much so in play this week. But I'm curious to see, how Taylor and this Indy offensive line does against one of the more highly touted front sevens in the Rams this week. And, he's kind of in that price range in that matchup where no one's really going to play Jonathan Taylor. I totally get it, but I wouldn't mind a few large field GPP darts there.
That's a really good point. And I was going to mention too, he actually had a touchdown on the 1 yard line that didn't end up counting. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great tournament play, and your Chubb call too, especially with the Browns defense, is great.
Okay. Anything else on running backs, Tuttle? If not, lead us into the wide receiver position here.
No, let's go to wide receiver. I mentioned at top, the chalk you'll see is Dallas and Chargers. Cooper Kupp will be heavily owned too. He was kind of the Sunday night pricing that got overlooked. So I think anything outside of this basically is going to be low enough owned where they're completely fine tournament options. So that gives you a lot of really good options. DK Metcalf is my favorite of the bunch. I've mentioned him a ton already, but even these Tampa Bay receivers, it's going to be difficult to figure out who's going to be the Tampa Bay receiver to have a good game on a weekly basis, but they're going to go fairly low owned. Mike Evans is my preferred option of the bunch. I just think you see it sometimes with veteran quarterbacks. You saw it with Peyton Manning. You see with Tom Brady. He knows how to get his guys back on track after a poor game. And Evans only had 3 receptions for 24 yards last week. I think he looks to feed him a little bit early just to get him going. So Evans is my preferred option of the Tampa Bay guys. In terms of like other low owned guys, you mentioned some of the Tennessee options. So I don't have it in front of me. I need to go back. So some of the rhetoric is like, hey, the Seattle defense is really not that bad. They've done really good after, I think it was like the second half of last season on. I remember writing towards the end of last year just how bad the quarterbacks they had faced were. It was like Jared Goff multiple times, a couple of backups 2 or 3 times. And like, I'm not buying that the Seattle defense is some amazing defense that we have to avoid. So I do think this is a really good bounce back spot for Tennessee's receiving options. And they're really good pivots off of like the Dallas Los Angeles game for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to come over and watch the 425 game, I'm the only Titans fan in Northeastern Pennsylvania. So, but I think you're right. Like that Chandler Jones, like football is such a game of 1 or 2 plays dictating a game, and Chandler Jones is dominating Taylor Lewan 7 months or 8 months off of ACL surgery. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. But I think we're going to see more of the 2020 Titans offense come out here and be at least a little bit more respectable against Seattle. And, according to Vegas, they should have a little bit of a passing game script too. Although, they get down the 10-yard line. They like to ride Derrick Henry, as you mentioned, Kristi. I mean, his price is just kind of egregious on FanDuel. But anyway, wide receivers, Kristi, talk to me here.
Yeah, so wide receivers, a few guys that are standing out for GPP plays. I like Justin Jefferson quite a bit this week. I mean, I liked him a lot last week. I think he's someone, his price, is really pretty good, especially on FanDuel. So I like going back to him. DeAndre Hopkins, obviously like that guy too. No one's going to probably pay up because of some of the options in the Dallas game and such. So I like him a ton. Mike Williams, going back to that Chargers game too, boy, I mean, he's been getting the targets. Keenan Allen will be popular. But I really like Mike Williams. I like Jamar Chase a ton, especially on FanDuel, at 5,500. He's just, someone that having a hard time passing up. And then we talked a little bit about Tampa Bay and Antonio Brown. I mean, he really looked pretty good. I mean, they talked a lot about him in preseason, had a good game last week. And, at lower ownership, I'm definitely going to come back to him at, right now we have him at 7.5%. So I think he's a great play. And then one of the last guys I'll mention too, kind of in that Chicago Cincy game, is Allen Robinson. He's way too talented. He's got a good matchup. They're missing, a top cornerback there. So at 7,200 on FanDuel, he's someone that I found in some of my GPP builds as well.
Yeah, like Tuttle mentioned, there's a plethora, if I said that correctly, of wide receivers coming in projected 10% or lower. And Allen Robinson's one of them, had a lot of volume. You didn't have a lot to show for it. If you're not feeling Metcalf, Tyler Lockett also in that game, wouldn't play them together. But I have a ton of Tom Brady and some 3 max single entry stuff. And I kind of just paired stacks as I saw fit, because I'd be lying if I knew where the volume went. I will say, though, I did not double stack Brady and Evans together, because I feel like if Evans is involved, like, it's Evans's game, right? It just seems to work that way, that when Evans is relevant, he's super relevant, like 2 or 3 touchdown type games. But I did see that since Tom Brady was in Tampa, Chris Godwin has 3 touchdowns in 2 games against Atlanta. If you're into kind of that game log surfing kind of thing, I don't know what's going to happen there. Anyway, let's get into tight end so we can get into a couple of questions before we have kickoff. So Tuttle, tight end, a little bit different of a situation than we had last week with, Kelsey and Waller up top and being super popular. Now we have some cheaper guys, Higbee, Fant, even Jared Cook in that game if you want a piece. Talk to me about tight ends this week, Tuttle.
Yeah, the 3 you mentioned, all great options. Darren Waller will be the chalk on FanDuel. He's just too cheap for what he is over there. He won't be as heavily owned on DK. He's just tough to build around on DraftKings. Some low-owned guys that I think won't be owned that could have big games. I mentioned I like the Patriots passing attack. The problem is who's going to score between Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith is the question mark. I slightly prefer Hunter Henry, but like it's very tough to figure out. Other option would be like Cole Kmet at 3,700. If you just want a guy that's going to be on the field, could see some targets. I think he was 2nd or 3rd last week in their target share. Adam Troutman going to be on the field, kind of similar story. So I will say I think we will see ownership concentrated a decent amount between like Higbee and Fant, and even Cook. But like what's the actual ceiling of these guys? Like this seems like a good position to me to pivot off the chalk and kind of get a little bit different.
Kristi, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm really high on Waller, and especially on FanDuel, I'm way overweight there. I mean, I was looking at some numbers dating back to, I think it was last year, week 13. I mean, he has the most targets per game at over like almost 12.5 compared to all the tight ends and receivers. I mean, his numbers are so great. So I'm definitely over the field there. Pivot, I do like George Kittle a bit, I think he's a good pivot in the San Francisco Philly game. And then I do like, we haven't talked a ton about Denver, but I mean, Noah Fant, with them missing Jerry Jeudy now, I think he is going to get a lot more targets. And then Kyle Pitts, I mean, everybody loved him last week. His ownership was sky high. If we loved him last week, I think, he deserves to take a look again this week. He's 5,500 on FanDuel. I think he's a great play. And then, GPP play, looking at Gronkowski again, too, in that Tampa Bay game, had a couple touchdowns last week to start things out, and think he's a fine play too.
Yeah, I think you guys took all of my thunder there in my pool. I pretty much have everybody you mentioned in my pool there. Gronk on some runbacks, Kyle Pitts bounce back game, did see 8 targets last week. And I do have some Calvin Ridley, who's going to come in super non-existent with some of my game stacks here. We'll see what happens here. Let's get to some questions before kickoff. Got a couple minutes here. Let me scroll up here. Let's see. FanDuel Cash. I'll start with you, Kristi. FanDuel Cash, Kamara and Philly defense, or Chubb and Browns defense?
I'd go Chubb and Browns defense. I've used them quite a bit. I'm a little bit overweight on them this week.
Okay. Tuttle, first of all, Winston Dean wants some NFT advice, so we'll get to that another time, I suppose. Let's see. Thoughts on Ingram as a cash game RB3 on DK, Tuttle?
Oh, don't do it.
Don't do it. I agree. We haven't met like 1%. I think I posted in chat. I play people who are owned in cash. That's just my strategy here. What about the Vegas backfield? Vegas backfield. Kenyon Drake popping in. Kristi, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's okay. I do, especially with his price. I think he's 5,500 too on FanDuel. Yeah, I think he's fine. For cash, I think you could definitely put him in. I don't know if that was the question on cash, but I think he's fine.
Okay. How about Tuttle? Is a 4 wide receiver cash game build today okay on DK?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Sticking with the Raiders, Kristi, last piece, single entry DraftKings, Henry Ruggs. How do you feel about that?
Did you say this was cash or just the last piece?
You know what? I don't know.
Okay. Last piece. Yeah, he's a guy that I don't have a ton in my player pool, so I'd probably maybe look to do it different, but he's okay. I mean, I don't mind him.
Steve had a question about Thielen. I don't know what the question exactly is. I guess just what are your thoughts, Thielen or Jefferson? Do you have a lean either way?
I like Jefferson more this week, but I mean, you can't deny that Thielen is the red zone guy. And I mean, we saw it again week 1. So I do like them both for tournaments.
I don't know who's playing more FanDuel. I'm taking a shot here that Kristi probably plays more FanDuel than Tuttle. Yep. I don't know. But FanDuel cash is Waller the must at tight end. Either way.
I think so. I really do. I mean, I'm definitely overweight there, and that's who I've got in for my cash.
Oh, Tuttle, I got you on this. We got a Mac Jones question. Mac Jones and Jonnu Smith or Teddy and Noah Fant DKGPP?
I mean, I can tell you which will be higher owned and which one projects better, and that's Teddy and Noah Fant for sure.
But variance, Tuttle. But variance.
Yeah, right. Embrace the variance.
Okay, well, thoughts on Noah Fant? We had a question right after that. Kristi, I know you said you were talking about some Denver pieces. Is he your favorite piece in that game or somebody else?
Yeah, I think he is. I like him quite a bit, and I certainly have exposure to him. He's definitely in my tight end pool.
Okay. We skipped defense, but we had a question. DK cash, cheap defense. And I checked earlier this morning before I was like good old Pee Wee football again, and the Jets had some ownership just because they were like 2,200. And no offense, it was Mac Jones, but it is what it is. Are the Jets still kind of leading the way in ownership here? I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, they are. And then I think I've seen a decent amount of Philadelphia too is the other cheapest defense.
Okay. We got a FanDuel 3v3 here, Kristi. We got about 2 minutes before a lock. Josh Allen, Cooper Kupp, and Broncos defense, or Herbert, Keenan Allen, Eagles defense for GPP.
For GPP, yep. I think I'd go the Herbert, Keenan Allen, Eagles.
Yeah, I'm stacking a quarterback receiver. I'm assuming, if you have Josh Allen, you want one of the pass catchers too. Yep. Tuttle, we have another 3v3. Kupp, James O'Shaughnessy, I think. Wow, we're in week 2. Kupp, James O'Shaughnessy, and Texans D, or Noah Fant, Higbee, and Eagles D for DK cash. Well, I'm not playing O'Shaughnessy in cash. Personally, I'm just going to take this one quick. Probably not going double tight end in cash either. So I would get a wide receiver or running back in your flex personally. Higher upside, right, Tuttle? Would you go there?
I agree with you.
Okay, cool. VJax in a DK single entry. Man, is that DJ? Is this Vincent Jackson? I mean, what year are we in? Am I missing somebody? Or is that DJax? I'm not playing DJax. Are you guys playing any?
Nope.
Deshaun? No? Okay. Yeah, DJax. Sorry, there it is. You know what? If you're a couple beers deep already and you want to throw him in the millie, like and pair him with Stafford, I totally get it. 12:59 here. Hit those submit buttons here. Tuttle, Kristi, you got anything else before we hit the lock button here?
Nope. Go Mac Jones. Go Nelson Aguilar.
Okay. All right. Any hot takes, Kristi? You got anything on the stove? Anything cooking up?
I think Justin Jefferson's going to be one of the top receiver plays today. I think I could easily see him, going for over 150 yards, couple touchdowns. I think I put that in the expert survey. So like him a ton.
Okay, it is 1 p.m. Eastern now. Devin, I know you just have such long Sundays. Are you with us? You want to grace us with any final words of your long morning, early afternoon here?
Let's see. Go Titans.
Well, he might.
Oh,
he might have his.
I'm muted for you guys, but not for the show. Go Titans.
Oh man, come on over, man. I'll order a pizza and some hot wings, and we'll root the boys on. But you never feel good about going up there into Seattle. But yeah, guys, thanks again. We got through another crunch time, and I'll be on Sunday Night Showdown with Keith tonight. Quick turnaround, a lot of good 4 o'clock games, and then a bunch of nobodies on Sunday Night Football tonight, right? So I'm just kidding.
I haven't even looked that far.
Yeah,
Baltimore KC, baby.
Yep.
Got a good one. So we'll see you Sunday night. So for Tuttle, Kristi, Devin, and the rest of the RotoGrinders crew, I'm Justin. Good luck in week 2.